Namaste.
Namaste, Dr. Shriram. Namaste.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Patanjali Yoga Sutra sessions. Thank you for taking this time, especially during this long weekend. I know that all of us make grand plans during the long weekends. So I'm especially grateful to all of you here, all of you in Zoom, for taking this time for this Yoga Sutra immersion. And together, all of us will embark on the journey of understanding the key tenets of yoga philosophy from the Yoga Sutras. So I'm very excited and really looking forward to this, to share this knowledge, whatever I have learned, and I continue to learn. And I'm sure I'll be learning from all of you as well during this Yoga Sutra immersion. So I'm really looking forward to it. We are still waiting for a couple of people to join. So meanwhile, I thought what we will do is, so we have a very special guest with us, Sumitra, who lives in Dallas. She's my yoga teacher's daughter. So I learned yoga. I started learning when I was 11 years old with Yogacharya Subramanian sir. And I studied with him for 14 years. And so we have Subramanian sir's daughter, Sumitra, here. And I have requested Sumitra to chant the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras. And I'm very grateful for Sumitra for agreeing to begin the Yoga Sutra immersion with her beautiful chanting. So thank you so much, Sumitra. Over to you. Thank you.
Can I begin with the prayer, Anna? Om. ஐந்து கரத்தனை யானை முகத்தனை இந்தின் நிலம்பிரை போன்ற எழுற்றினை நந்தி மகந்தனை ஞான கொழுந்தினை குன்றியில் வைத்தடி போற்றுகின்றேனே யஸ்த்யக்த்வா ரூபமாத்யம் பிரபவதி ஜகதः அநேகதா அனுக்ரஹாய பிரக்ஷீண க்லேஷராசிः விஷம விஷதரோ அநேகவக்த்ர சுபோகி सर्वज्ञान प्रसूतिः भुजग परिकर प्रीतय यस्य नित्यं देवो हीशः सवो व्यात् सित विमलतनुः योगदो योगयुक्तः योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिराणतोऽस्मि आबाहु पुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं श्रीमते अनन्ताय नागराजाय नमो नमः अस्मत्ताचार्येभ्यः सर्वेभ्यो नमो नमः अथ समाधिपादः अथ योगानुशासनं योगः चित्तवृत्तिनिरोधः तदा द्रष्टुः स्वरूपे अवस्थानं वृत्तिसारूप्यम् इतरत्र वृत्तय पञ्चतयः क्लिष्टाः प्रमाण विपर्यय विकल्प निद्रा स्मृतयः प्रत्यक्ष अनुमान आगमाः प्रमाणानि विपर्ययो मिथ्याज्ञानम् अतद्रूप प्रतिष्ठं शब्द ज्ञानानुपाति वस्तु शून्यो विकल्पः अभाव प्रत्ययालम्बना तमो वृत्तिर्निद्रा अनुभूत विषय असंप्रमोषः स्मृतिः अभ्यास वैराग्याभ्यां तन्निरोधः तत्र स्थितौ यत्नोऽभ्यासः स तु दीर्घकाल नैरन्तर्य सत्कार आदरा आसेवितो दृढभूमिः दृष्टानुश्रविक विषय वितृष्णस्य वशीकार संज्ञा वैराग्यं तत्परं पुरुषख्यातेः गुणवैतृष्ण्यं वितर्क विचार आनन्द अस्मितारूप अनुगमात् संप्रज्ञातः विराम प्रत्यय अभ्यास पूर्वः संस्कार शेषः अन्यः भवत् प्रत्ययो विदेह प्रकृतिलयानां श्रद्धा वीर्य स्मृति समाधि प्रज्ञा पूर्वक इतरेषां तीव्र संवेगानामासन्नः मृदु मध्य अधिमात्रत्वात् ततोऽपि विशेषः ईश्वर प्रणिधानाद्वा क्लेश कर्म विपाक आशयैः अपरामृष्टः पुरुष विशेष ईश्वरः तत्र निरतिशयं सर्वज्ञ बीजं स एष पूर्वेषामपि गुरुः कालेनादवच्छेदात् तस्य वाचकः प्रणवः तज्जपः तदर्थभावनं ततः प्रत्यक्चेतनाधिगमः अपि अन्तरायाभावश्च व्याधि स्त्यान संशय प्रमाद आलस्य अविरति भ्रान्ति दर्शन अलभ्यभूमिकत्व अनवस्थितत्वानि चित्त विक्षेपाः ते अन्तरायाः दुःख धौर्मणस्य अंगमे जयत्व श्वास प्रश्वासाः विक्षेप सह भुवः तत्प्रतिषेधार्थम् एकतत्वाभ्यासः मैत्री करुणा मुदितोपेक्षाणां सुख दुःख पुण्या पुण्य विषयानां भावनातः चित्त प्रसादनं प्रच्छर्दन विधारणाभ्यां वा प्राणस्य विषयवती वा प्रवृत्तिरुत्पन्ना मनसः स्थितिनिबन्धिनी विशोका वा ज्योतिष्मति वीतराग विषयं वा चित्तं स्वप्न निद्रा ज्ञानालम्बनं वा यथाभिमत ध्यानाद्वा परममहत्वान्तः अस्य वशीकारः क्षीणवृत्तेः अभिजातस्येव मनेः ग्रहीतृ ग्रहण ग्राह्येषु तत्तदञ्जनता समापत्तिः तत्र शब्दार्थ ज्ञान विकल्पैः संकीर्णा सवितर्का समापत्तिः स्मृति परिशुद्धौ स्वरूप शून्येव अर्थमात्र निर्भासा निर्वितर्का एतयैव सविचार निर्विचारा च सूक्ष्म विषया व्याख्याता सूक्ष्म विषयत्वं च अलिंग पर्यवसानं ता एव सबीज समाधिः निर्विचार वैशारध्ये अध्यात्म प्रसादः ऋतंभरा तत्र प्रज्ञा श्रुतानुमान प्रज्ञाभ्याम् अन्य विषया विशेषार्थत्वात् तज्ज संस्कारः अन्य संस्कार प्रतिबन्धी तस्यापि निरोधे सर्वनिरोधात् निर्बीजः समाधिः इति पातञ्जलयोगसूत्रे प्रथमः समाधिपादः.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sumitra ji, for the very melodious rendition of the first chapter of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Perhaps even without knowing the meaning, just by listening to the chant, it brings the mind to a place of tranquility. So once again, thank you so much for beginning our Yoga Sutra immersion with a beautiful chant. Also, I welcome the Zoom participants. If possible, I will encourage all of you to start the video so that there is interaction, so that I can see everyone's face if you are comfortable. So once again, welcome to today's session of the Yoga Sutra immersion. So here is the plan. Today's session, we will go up to 5:30 p.m. and we will take a 10-minute break in between. The topic for today's session, we are going to begin with an introduction. The first hour before the break will be an introduction, and we will examine the first 4 sutras of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, which is like an abstract. So if you read a manuscript, a scientific manuscript, say, they capture the main ideas, the main points in the initial part, the abstract. So the first 4 sutras, Patanjali does exactly that. He captures the main ideas that are contained in the foundations of yoga. And what is yoga? Why should we do yoga? What is the benefit of doing these yoga practices? So he captures all of that. And these 4 sutras, they are called a Chatussutraha or Chatussutri. So the first 4 sutras. And that's what we will cover today. In fact, we have written down the 4 sutras here on the whiteboard. And for the sake of the Zoom participants, you will also find it as a image attachment in the WhatsApp group. So Sriniji has captured the image and he has sent it in the WhatsApp group. You can also refer to that because in Zoom, it may not be very clear. Okay. So that is the topic we will cover for the first hour. And then in the second hour, we will talk about many different ideas, including what is Ashtanga Yoga. We will see an overview of Ashtanga Yoga, which is perhaps the most well-known part, well-known teachings of Patanjali. So I hope everyone is enthusiastic as we embark on the journey of the Yoga Sutra study. So the main idea here in the next 4 days is not to cover all the sutras, because that will take over a year. You can imagine, right? 196 sutras are there, or 197, depending on which version. There is some version where there's an extra sutra in the 3rd chapter. So 196 or 197 sutras. We will cover some portions of the Yoga Sutras. For example, Ashtanga Yoga we will cover, and some of the inner practices and the mechanics of inner transformation. We will cover that. And another topic we will cover is the topic of Guru and Ishvara as the Guru. Patanjali talks about that in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras. And on July 4th, we will also talk about what is freedom. So the last chapter of the Yoga Sutras is called Kaivalya Pada. Kaivalya means aloneness or freedom. The reason why it's called aloneness is because you're so free that you're no longer trapped in the prakriti or in the physical world. The idea is that, for example, when you sit for meditation, we practice meditation with a lot of expectations, right? Oh, I'm going to experience some profound bliss. I'm going to enter samadhi. But what happens is when we close our eyes in meditation, we become tormented by the discomforts of the body. We are trapped by the body, the discomforts. Oh, my low back hurts, knee hurts, pain here, itching, scratching. So the body traps our awareness. So how to free ourselves from the clutches of the prakriti is what freedom is about. And Patanjali gives a very beautiful definition of what freedom is. And we will see that on July 4th. So that is the plan. And we will also keep this sessions interactive, because we are a small group, and that affords us the opportunity to have lively discussions, and feel free to interrupt, ask questions, and if you have any thoughts to share or comment, and you can bring about those ideas as well. So I look forward to hearing all of you also participate in this Yoga Sutra immersion. Okay. Now, let us talk about what sutra is first. So Yoga Sutras is the topic, right? So sutra, the word sutra itself means thread of knowledge. Each sutra is like a aphorism or a short sentence, short and terse sentence. You can think of it as a thread of knowledge. The English word suture and the Sanskrit word sutra, they come from the same root, sutra. And there are 196 or 197 sutras in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, divided into 4 chapters. The first chapter is called Samadhi Pada, the chapter on Samadhi, which you heard in the beautiful voice of Sumitra. Second chapter is called Sadhana Pada. Sadhana means practices. What are the individual practices? What should we do in order to attain the state of yoga? The third chapter is called Vibhuti Pada, where Patanjali describes the attainments or accomplishments, that the powers that one receives when we follow the discipline of yoga. What are the changes that you will experience? The power of the mind, the health in the body, and so forth. And the fourth chapter is called the Kaivalya Pada. Kaivalya is freedom or liberation. And these are the 4 chapters of the Yoga Sutras. So in order for any text to qualify as a sutra text, you see, there are different types of presentations possible. Bhagavad Gita is written in a shloka form, not sutra form. So shloka have a certain meter or a cadence to them. For example, each verse in the Bhagavad Gita contains 8 syllables per line, or in some shlokas, 11 syllables per line. And these are called chandas, and there's a big science behind it. Whereas in the sutra form, it is like a short prose, like a short sentence. In fact, it is so short. One of the attributes of sutra form is alpa aksharam. Alpa aksharam means as few words as possible. It's like a bullet point that we present in a PowerPoint slide, like a bullet point. They're not even complete sentences. The sutras can be incomplete sentences. And in order to complete the sentence, we have to include implicitly some words. There could be some verbs that we need to implicitly introduce in them to make it complete sentence. So you filter out all the unnecessary words and capture the essence of it in as few words as possible. In English, they call it pithy, right? P-I-T-H-Y, pithy, or concise. It's pithy, it is concise, it's also direct. So there are 6 attributes of the sutra form of writing. And the 6 attributes, I'll just enumerate them. First is Alpaksharam, few words, as few words as possible. And then the second, does anyone know what the 6 attributes are? Yes, would you like to share?
Alpaksharam, limited words. Asandigdam, doubt-free. Saravat, that which captures the essence. Sarvato Mukham, Mukham means face. Sarvato Mukham, a text which captures the entire, all the facets that is meant to be captured. Shvato Mukham, Astobham, no filler words, no unnecessary words. Anavadhyam, Anavadhyam is indisputable, something which is absolute.
So these are the 6 attributes of a sutra. Thank you so much, Sumitra. So Alpaksharam, which is few words. Asandigdam, which means the meaning is direct without any doubt. 2 people who read the same sentence, they take the same meaning out of it. It's like a scientific text. If you want to write a manuscript on how to build a rocket, if each person takes away different thing, one person says, okay, let me build a round rocket. Another person says, let me a rectangular rocket. Then there'll be chaos, right? You can imagine it will create a big mess. So it should be so clear that there is no ambiguity there. So Alpaksharam Asandigdam. Saravat, Sara means essence. It should capture the heart of the matter, heart and soul of that subject. It should not be the periphery of that subject. For example, when we talk about yoga, we should not talk only about asanas. Unfortunately, in many of the modern books on yoga, that's what we see, right? You open the pages of a book, you will see pictures, especially in this day and age, Instagram age, right? Yoga, we assume it is picture perfect postures. But yoga is much more than that. So going to the heart of that matter, not stopping at the periphery, that is Saravat. And then Vishwatomukam means it's a comprehensive treatment of that subject. Saravat, Vishwatomukam, and then Astobham. Astobham means no filler words, no unnecessary or filler words. In shlokas, there could be filler words. Why do they use filler words? Because it has to adhere to the cadence or the rhythm, the meter, the chandas. So you add some filler words. In sutras, we don't need to do that. So remove all the filler words. So as short as possible. Saravat, Vishwatomukam, Astobham, Anavadyam. Anavadyam means it should contain unassailable logic. It cannot be disproved. So this is the list of the 6 attributes of sutra. And Patanjali's text is one of the classic examples of the sutra form of writing. Patanjali accomplishes all of these 6 attributes in his Yoga Sutras. So what is contained in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali captures that in the first 4 sutras, and that is what we are going to examine in the next hour. So shall we jump into it? Shall we jump into the Yoga Sutras? Right? So you can see the first 4 sutras here, and it's also been sent out in the WhatsApp group. You can refer to the picture as well.
Ramji, are you
So the
going...
first sutra, that's a question. Yes, Anuja.
Shriramji, are you going to share with us these 6 attributes of sutras, or are we going to receive the recording?
Yeah, this is being recorded. What I will do is, I will also send the picture of the 6 attributes, and I will share it in the WhatsApp group as well.
With the meaning, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
The 6 attributes with the meaning. In fact, the whole thing appears in a shloka, which Sumitra ji recited, right? Alpaksharam asandigdham saravat vishwato mukham astobham anavadyam cha sutram sutra vido viduhu. So this is the shloka which captures what a sutra is.
Thank you.
Okay. So now let us jump into the subject of the Yoga Sutras. The first 4 sutras we are going to examine now. Chatussutri. So the first sutra of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Atha yoga anushasanam. So the very first word is atha, means now. Now. And when we look at Maharishi Vyasa's commentary on the Yoga Sutras, he writes a very big paragraph about why does Patanjali begin his text with the word atha. Because the very first word of the text is very, very important, because that captures the first idea about what yoga is, about what the subject is. For example, Bhagavad Gita starts with the word dharma. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre, dharma. In Yoga Sutras, it starts with the word atha. Atha, now. So if the mind is daydreaming about something that happened in the past, right? Maybe it's happening to some of us right now. Or if it is thinking about July 4th plans, right? Again, it might be happening to some of us. Or it might be thinking about dinner. So the mind is vacillating from past to future. It is not anchored in the present. And it turns out the true power that we can exercise is only in the present moment. So that is why he begins the Yoga Sutras with atha. Many people think, let me start practicing yoga from tomorrow, right? Or from 2024. So it's always in the future. So Patanjali says, no. Let's start practicing now. And the mind will resist. Oh, I just had lunch. My teacher told me don't practice yoga after eating food, right? But Patanjali says, no, yoga is not just something that we practice inside the yoga mat. You can practice yoga at any instant of time. Any instant is conducive for the experience and the expression of yoga. And we will see when we talk about abhyasa, we are going to see how we can practice yoga at every instant of time. So my teacher, Yogacharya Subramanian sir, so he used to say that when people ask him the question, how much time should I devote for the practice of yoga? He will always say 24 hours. Because every moment we can use for the practice of yoga. He used to say that a true yogi is not a yogi only inside the yoga mat and a bhogi outside the yoga mat. One has to be a full-time yogi, all 24 hours. Every moment of now. They say the eternal moment of now. The eternal moment of now. We are in a state of yoga. That is what Patanjali is asking us to do. Change our perspective about time so that in this moment, the power that we have can be exercised only in this moment of now, atha. Yoga, and we'll see what yoga means. In fact, we have enumerated 7 definitions. We will go through in a few moments. And anushasanam. Shasana means discipline or rules. Shasanam. Shasanam is actually, you can think of it as commandments or the constitution. So in a country, so they live by certain rules and regulations, the constitution. So those rules are called shasanam. Shasanam is used in a kingdom where the king says, okay, these are the rules of the land. So those rules and regulations become shasanam. And he uses a prefix, anu shasanam, anushasanam. There are 2 meanings that the scholars have given. What is anushasanam, right? Would you like to know what are the 2 meanings of anushasanam? So one meaning of anushasanam is these rules are consistent with the rules that were given before. Before means in the Vedas. So the rules that Patanjali is going to present in his Yoga Sutras are consistent. They are not against the rules or not contradicting the rules from the Vedas. They're consistent. Anu means to follow. Anushasanam. So Anushasanam, it follows the Shasanam that was given before. Anushasanam. There's another interpretation for Anushasanam, which means I willingly follow the rules that have been established in the practice of yoga. It is not that my spouse has dragged me into a yoga class. I don't feel like doing yoga, but I'm here because against my will, I was dragged here. and I have to do it. So I'm obligated to do it. So with some resistance, if we do it, then it is not Anushasana, right? So Anushasana means we are willingly, we are happily jumping into the yoga mat. We are happily being a sadhak of yoga. We are happily practicing yoga. So you can think of it as a self-discipline, self-inspired discipline. Anushasana, self-inspired discipline.
So Shasana means rules and Anu means somebody who, sorry, so Anu means like willingly do it. So somebody who willingly follows.
Exactly. So my will is aligned with the will of the land or the constitution. So both of them are in agreement. Sometimes we have to follow rules, although we don't agree with them. We may not want to stop at a stop sign, right? But we have to do it anyway because there's a cop there. So those rules are not Anushasana. The rules are there, but we are unwillingly, we are following it. But willingly following the rules is called Anushasana. Anushasana. Now, you will notice one of the goals of yoga is Kaivalyam. What is Kaivalyam? Again, we will see that on the July 4th. But one of the definitions of Kaivalyam is called Kevalasya Bhavanam. Kevalasya Bhavanam is Kaivalyam. That means you are unconditionally free or unconditionally happy. You are not trapped by others. Somebody else is not pushing your buttons. You're not like a vending machine where our state of mind is actually controlled by others. You are independent. So that is Kevalasya Bhavana. And although that is one of the goals of yoga, Patanjali here says, follow these rules, which seems to be exactly in opposition to that goal, right? You want to be free, but then the first thing Patanjali says is don't be free, follow these rules, right? It seems to be a contradiction. Now, we have to convince our intellect, why is this a good idea? So if I bind myself to this discipline, how is it going to set me free, right? So what is discipline? Before we go into the next sutra, it's a good idea to ask ourselves, what is discipline and why is it a good idea to follow a discipline? Why can't I be impulsive? Okay, I want to experience Kaivalya right now. So I will do what I want. I'm going to eat junk food because that's what I feel like doing now. I'm going to overeat. I'm going to eat junk food. I don't feel like doing yoga, so I'm going to skip my daily sadhana. So I'm going to live my life based on the impulse that arises in that moment. What do you think can happen in such a situation? Why is it not a good idea?
Because things can go right or things can go wrong.
Yes. So the idea is, in future, the experience might be diminished or we might get more bound. For example, if we consume junk food, then tomorrow we may have a tummy ache, right? And we are not so free anymore. We cannot do the activities that we want to do. With a tummy ache, even the same delicious food will be experienced as something miserable. Oh, yesterday I felt it was good, but today I can't even imagine eating the same thing. So such is the state of mind. We are actually reducing our freedom in the future if we indulge in our impulses. So what is discipline? Discipline means you are willingly going through a short-term discomfort. You cannot even say discomfort, short-term regulation. You're regulating yourself for the sake of long-term joy. Makes sense, right? You are directing yourself, regulating yourself, even though it's uncomfortable in the moment, because you know that tomorrow or in a future time, it will lead you towards freedom.
Question.
Yeah.
What is the sutra started with Atha, right? Like now. So what if the argument is if you're constant, then what you're doing today is always in relation to what it might be in the future.
Future. That's a
But
very
then
good
you're
point.
not thinking of the today, right? Like, because the action you're doing right now, but your action is oriented to what it might be in the future. So then it's not about today. It's about.
That's an excellent point. So you're already thinking about future. So right now, in the present moment, we are diminishing the joy, but in future, we are going to be joyful. But that goes against what Patanjali said with Atha. That's an excellent question, right? So instead of looking at it that way, let's deepen our perspective of that. Instead of thinking about short term and long term, we can think about it as lesser joy and a higher joy in the same moment. You see what I'm saying? Lesser joy and higher joy. For example, suppose somebody provokes you. Maybe they hurl an insult, and we feel like giving the insult back to them. So that is called a pratikar. That means whatever action somebody does, a negative action that provokes us, and we give it back to them. Then do we feel happy about it? We have observed sagely people, right, who even under provocation, they remain so centered. And we want to be like them, right? Oh, wow, that's a role model. I wish I was like that. We are inspired by seeing them, right? So when we look at somebody like that, and then we decide, okay, let me practice being like that. So instead of being impulsive and bringing myself to indulge in that lesser joy of, hurling an insult back, let me experience a higher joy of being centered. You see, it's in the same moment. So that's a statement for that. In fact, that's a definition of sadhana. All the yoga practices, where do they come from, right? There's a very beautiful saying. It says, Siddhasya lakshanani sadhakasya sadhanani. Siddha means a person who is accomplished, who is already a great yogi. Lakshana means their qualities or attributes. How do they behave? So in Bhagavad Gita, for example, there are so many occasions where Krishna talks about the attributes of a saintly or a sagely person. Sthita Prajna Lakshanas towards the end of the 2nd chapter, or Bhakta Lakshanas in the 12th chapter, or in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Gunatita Lakshanas, attributes of great people. And when we listen to them, we get inspired. Oh, I want to be like that. They're so centered. They're happy come what may. Even under ups and downs, their mind is so stable. They don't get caught up or they don't give up. They're consistent throughout. I want to be like that. So, Siddhasya Lakshanani, the attributes of Siddha yogi, let it be my sadhana. So, Siddhasya Lakshanani, Sadhakasya Sadhanani. So for a sadhaka, it becomes the sadhanas. So that which comes naturally for an accomplished person, let it be the sadhana, the practice for the student or a novice yoga practitioner. That's the idea here. That is the Anushasana. Willingly following the rules and regulations. We cannot even think of them as bondage because you want to be like that. You're inspired to be like them. You see? That's also another big difference. Discipline is not torturing oneself. You see? Okay, I'm going to discipline myself. I need to do 2 hours of yoga asanas every day. And thinking of it as a big torture. All of us have heard this statement, right? No pain, no gain. So let me give myself a big dose of pain so that ultimately I will gain a lot. And what we discover is ultimately we gain a lot of sore muscles, right? In fact, teacher, Yogacharya Subramanian sir, so he used to say, from sore muscles to soaring spirit. That is what yoga, sore muscles to soaring spirit. So the idea is, the difference between Anushasanam and torture is, in torture, there is no happiness either in the short term or in the long term. Zero happiness. Whereas in discipline, there is the ultimate goal of discipline is to attain joy, right? And here is one more thing. When you're already joyful, you don't need any discipline. You have reached there, right? You need discipline only when you are not yet in that space. For example, you will consume medicine only if you are sick. Nobody says, oh, today I feel so happy. I want to eat a lot of medicines today. Right? I want to go see the doctor today. Oh, doctor, I'm so happy. Please diagnose what's happening to me. And the doctor will think, oh, something's definitely wrong with you, right? So the thing is, discipline is needed only when we are not achieved that state. And in order to regulate ourselves so that we gain that higher state of happiness is what Anushasanam is about. I hope it's clear, right? Anushasanam. Now, what we see is even this one statement, one sutra, there was so much to unpack, right? So that's the beauty of a sutra. It's like a seed. A seed will grow into a big tree. That is why when we look at the bhashyas or the commentaries by great scholars, and one of the classic commentaries is Sage Vyasa's commentary, and there are other great people who have given commentaries. Shankara himself has given a commentary on Vyasa Bhashya of Patanjali. So it's a two-level commentary. And then great sages like Sadashiva Brahmendra has given a commentary on the Yoga Sutras. And Raja Bhoja, great king, was also a great scholar. He wrote a commentary on the Yoga Sutras. And in fact, the Dhyana Shlokas that Sumitra chanted in the beginning, Yastektva Rupamadhyam, Prabhavati Jagata, etc. Those Dhyana Shlokas were composed by Raja Bhoja, who lived in the 9th century AD. So there are many classic commentaries on the Yoga Sutras, and they expand each sutra. Some sutras, pages together, they give commentary. And the classic example of the pages of commentary is the second sutra. So we just covered the first sutra. So wait, the second sutra has even more to say. Second sutra defines what yoga is. Patanjali, in his words, he defines yoga. This is one of the most famous sutras of Patanjali. I'm sure everyone has heard it before, right? So what is yoga? Patanjali says, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. When you combine them, use all the sandhi rules, it becomes yogas chitta vritti nirodha. So what does it mean? So we're going to look at first a translation, and then we will unpack the meanings, and we will see several other definitions of yoga. But before we jump into it, are there any questions, thoughts, comments, especially from our Zoom viewers? Okay.
We're just enjoying it, Ramji. We are just enjoying it.
Perfect. So if you have any questions, feel free to, in Zoom, you can raise the hand or you can unmute yourself and ask any questions.
I think the word Anushasanam, I was just relating it with the example of my child, because habits is what is introduced, right? In the present, I'm tired. And if I let my child sit and watch TV for a long time, once, she's going to understand that if she troubles me, she's going to get it every time. So if I make that mistake in the present moment, thinking that I need to be free now, it's going to accumulate and it's going to become a habit for her in the future. And then she's going to get trapped in that habit of watching TV and not learning how to manage her boredom. Instead, if I just try to get over my mental restriction and tiredness during the present moment, just the short-term discomfort, and still try to engage her in a mindful way, maybe for the future. In the future, she won't have that habit and she might do something creative with her. So, I mean, I was just thinking how the discipline is so essential, because it helps in habit formation, and which becomes a pattern, right? Once you get stuck in that vicious cycle, how can you get bound and how can you experience freedom?
Yes, in fact, Patanjali agrees with you. Towards the end of the first chapter, there's a sutra, Tajja Samskaro Anya Samskara Pratibandhi. So what Patanjali says is one of the outcomes of all these yoga practices is replacing one samskara by a different samskara. Perhaps the samskara now is upon provocation, react back with more anger or rage. Out of habit, impulsively the mind goes towards that reaction. But yoga creates a space for inner transformation to happen. Instead of yelling back or reacting back in anger, so we replace the samskara so that we remain centered and we respond from a place of compassion, perhaps. You see? So changing the habit, changing the samskaras is what the inner transformation that yoga brings about. Later on, Patanjali also says we have to drop that samskara as well. Ultimately, the yogi is no longer bound by any habit. So we have to transcend even a good habit, right? Even a good habit is a habit, as they say, right? Even if you win in a rat race, you are still a rat. So even if you have good samskaras, good habits, you are still trying to build up good habits. And because things change in the world, what is a good habit at one time may not be the best habit now. We have to keep on changing things. So
And just reminded
transcend
of
that.
cleanliness. Like, it's good to be clean, but it's not okay to be obsessed about it to such an extent that even if one thing is off place, if it's going to give you a headache, then it's not freedom anymore. Right?
Yes, it's like an OCD, right?
Which is exactly what is happening to me. So,
yes, so sometimes we get caught up in that. Oh, I have to change, I have to be a good person, and so being obsessed with that. But we're going to see later, we transcend samskaras as well. The yogi is spontaneous. Before the inner transformation happened, we were impulsive. Impulsive means we were a slave to our habits. Whereas spontaneous, so what's the difference between being impulsive and spontaneous? Something to think about. So something to contemplate about. A yogi is spontaneous. For example, a yogi is kind, not because they have trained themselves to be kind. It is because it's their nature. You see, it's their nature. That's how they respond when they interact with people. They are kind. If they see a child falling down, they will immediately go and help them, not because they will receive a reward. Or somebody will pat them on their back and they will give words of praise. No, even if nobody is watching, the yogi is being very kind. You see, so that is being spontaneous. There is no skill or habit that need to be developed in order to be kind. They're spontaneously kind. Okay. So shall we move on to the second sutra? Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Definition of yoga according to Patanjali is chitta vritti nirodha. And we're going to spend a lot of time in the sutra. The meaning, the translation of this is yoga is the state of mind where the activities of the chitta here we are translating it as mind, but we will expand our definition a little more in a few moments. So vrittis means activities. Vritti means activity. Usually people use the word vritti in Sanskrit to ask, what are you doing? Profession. So what is your vritti? So I'm a farmer, I'm an engineer, I'm an artist, like that. So what do you do? So what does the mind do? What does the chitta do? Is it chitta vrittis? Chitta vritti. And nirodha. Nirodha comes from the root word ruddha. Rudyate means to encircle. Encircle. Nirodha means the word ni. It's a prefix. This prefix or upasarga it's called in Sanskrit. So this ni stands for nitaram. Nitaram means always. Nitaram, consistently, without taking a break. Nitaram, you are encircling it. So what does it mean? Encircling with what? Are you trying to stop the activities of the chittas? So what's happening here is, there are many interpretations, and I'm going to use the interpretation given by Swami Bodhanandaji, with whom I've also studied the Yoga Sutras. He talks about Nirodha as watching. Watch. So you encircle the chitta with your mindfulness. Mindfulness. It's like when a child is in bad behavior, right? They are yelling, screaming. But if the parent is simply watching them, they don't even have to say anything. They'll quiet down, right? Just watch, encircle them with your spotlight of awareness, and the mind settles down. That is what Nirodha is. Nitaram rudyate iti Nirodha. Nitaram rudyate. So settling down, that means the activities of the mind, rather than being excessive or uncontrolled activity of the mind. Because when we examine the mind, that is how it is, right? The mind is so unruly. It doesn't lend itself to being ruled by our deliberate intentions. The mind has its own habits. It's like an incessant flow of thoughts. You want the mind to be quiet. You request the mind, oh mind, please be quiet. It doesn't listen to us, right? The incessant flow of thoughts, and it's consuming, draining our energy. When we examine the thoughts in the mind, most of the thoughts are not high quality thoughts, mundane thoughts, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse that says, Atatvat atatvartavad alpam cha tat tamasamudahritam. That means most of the thoughts in our mind as alpam. Alpam. We saw this word alpam with alpaksharam, few words. So alpam means trivial or mundane. Most of the thoughts that run in our mind are mundane thoughts. You agree, right? Not Nobel Prize winning thoughts, mundane thoughts. What did I eat yesterday? Or what is that celebrity doing? So like that. So gossip, our mind is captured by all this gossip or trivial thoughts. And it's consuming our energy, because each of these thoughts, they drain prana from the system. And after a few hours, we feel depleted, exhausted. Oh, I have no energy left. Obviously, there's no energy, because most of the energy we spend on trivial thoughts. It's like a millionaire spending all their money in trinkets, unnecessary things, and they go bankrupt. But the problem is more insidious than that. It is not just that they feel drained out. If you are drained, you can fill the energy back, do some pranayama, eat some nutritious food, and maybe it's like if your cell phone is drained, you simply recharge. But it doesn't happen that way, because what happens is, when the mind is filled with incessant flow of thoughts, not only does it drain energy, it also increases disorder or chaos in the system. And if you're familiar with the second law of thermodynamics, entropy increases, which is an irreversible process. Wear and tear that happens in the mind and body is irreversible. You cannot reverse it by just charging, right? So there is an irreversible damage that happens, wear and tear that happens. So we don't want that to take place. So we want to regulate the mind. We want to bring the mind to a place of stability, place of peace, tranquility, so that not only do we conserve energy, we conserve entropy. Wear and tear in the system is reduced. It makes sense, right? So that is what Chitta Vritti Nirodha is. Swami Vivekananda gives a very beautiful analogy. Our mind is like a monkey, right? Jumping all around the place. But it is not just a regular monkey. A monkey that is drunk, intoxicated with all these desires, the passions and likes and dislikes and all that. It's a drunk monkey. And not just a regular drunk monkey, a drunk monkey whose tail has been bitten by a scorpion. Right? You can imagine how unruly this monkey is going to be. So this is how our mind behaves. So drunk with all the likes and dislikes and the passion and all that, and stung by the scorpion of, when we are provoked by the world. So it's like a scorpion. It's like the volcano is about to erupt. Somebody taps your shoulders and then there's a, oh, why are you disturbing me? And they will feel, oh my God, I didn't do anything. I just tapped your shoulder. And there's a big reaction, right? So that's how our mind is, like a monkey mind. What do? Nirodha, encircle the mind with awareness so that it settles down just by your watchful eyes. If your boss is watching, then we'll be on our best behavior, right? So like that, when there is mindfulness, when there's a spotlight of awareness, then we bring the mind to a place of discipline. The mind is more tranquil. Chitta vritti nirodha happens. The monkey is no longer restless. The monkey is meditating, right? Can you imagine a monkey sitting and meditating? So that's how our mind becomes. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says that the mind is like a hurricane, like a wind, category 6 hurricane, right? So fierce, so intense. How do you expect me to quiet the mind? My mind is so incessant with flow of thoughts. And you are telling me to close my eyes and allow the mind to be peaceful. It's not for me. Maybe meditation is for others. And I am the single exception in the universe where meditation is not going to work for me. So that's what Arjuna says. Right? And Krishna says, no. With the practice of yoga, and we will see that sutra and that shloka, corresponding shloka from the Bhagavad Gita a little later. Krishna says the mind can be brought under our control. So this is what Chitta Vritti Nirodha is. Now, this definition, Chitta Vritti Nirodha, doesn't talk about yoga as union, right? Usually, we read about the definition of yoga as union, uniting the mind and the body. For example, the body is here, but mind is already in the vacation. Mind and the body are divided, so there is no yoga there. Yoga means mind and the body are together. There is no tug of war. There is no inner conflict. Or the same mind is scattered or shattered in different places. Again, my teacher used to say that when the mind is in pieces, there is no peace of mind. So when you unite the mind together in harmony, then we experience peace of mind. Union is yoga. That is one of the definitions of yoga. Yoga as union. Yujir yoge is what Panini, the great grammarian, the father of Sanskrit grammar, he says Yujir yoge. Yoga is union. In fact, he gives 3 definitions in this Dhatu Pata. Panini, he gives 3 definitions. The first 3 definitions you see here are given in the Dhatu Pata. Dhatu means verb roots of Sanskrit. There are close to 2000 dhatus. And Panini compiled them in the Dhatu Pata. And the dhatu for the word yoga is yuj. Yuj is a dhatu, the root word. And yuj has 3 different meanings. So in the dictionary, you can think of it as a dictionary of verb roots. The first definition, yoga as union, yujir yoge, is what Panini says. Yoga is union. And different yoga texts talk about union between what and what. It could be union between the body and the mind. It could be uniting the body itself, because the body is Kurukshetra, right? In fact, Bhagavad Gita defines Kshetram as the body. Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetramiti Abhidiyate. First verse in the, or the second verse in the 13th chapter. So this body is called Kshetram. This Shariram is called Kshetram. And it is not just a Kshetram, it's a Kurukshetram with a war that is happening. For example, the body says, give me nutritious food. Tongue says, no, give me junk food. And there's a huge war that is raging between the tongue and the body's intelligence. So yoga is to unite them, reconcile this conflict, so that what the tongue wants and what the body wants become one and the same. So that is union at the body level. That's called the horizontal union. At this level, Annamaya Kosha, let's bring harmony. But vertical integration or vertical union is between the body and the mind. Let's bring union. You see? And of course, all levels of our existence. You have the Pranamaya Kosha, the prana, the breath, and then the Manomaya Kosha, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya Kosha, etc. All levels of our existence, the vertical integration, so that we are all one cohesive entity, not a divided entity. There is no conflict of interest in the system. We are united whole. That is why the whole practice of yoga, we call it holistic. We will come to that when we talk about Ashtanga Yoga. Why is the practice holistic? So this is one definition of yoga, union. Now the important thing to note here is Patanjali's definition of yoga does not reflect this union. It is not consistent with this definition. So which of these 7 definitions that Patanjali's definition of yoga is consistent with? We are going to see that. So union, yes, it is one definition. Many yoga texts define it that way. Union of the body, breath, mind, or union of the small self with the bigger self, Jivatman with the Paramatman, etc. There are many ways, or prana with the apana. So there are many ways in which yoga can be defined as a union. But Patanjali's definition is consistent with the second one that you see here. Second definition, again you find it in Panini's Dhatupata. Yoga is defined as samadhi. Yuja samadhau is the definition given in the Dhatupata. Yuja samadhau. And you find many such definitions that are consistent with this in other scriptures as well. Bhagavad Gita, for example, samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatvam, equilibrium of the mind, is yoga. Same Bhagavad Gita, there is samadhau achala buddhihi, samadhav achala buddhihi, tada yogam avapsyasi. Again from the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Yoga is samadhi. And also the Vyasa Bhashya, Vyasa's commentary on the Yoga Sutras, the very first statement where he's talking about the first sutra, the very first statement that Vyasa makes is Yogaha Samadhihi. He starts his commentary with that statement, Yogaha Samadhihi. So it subscribes to the second definition. Yoga is equilibrium. Question?
So is it that the definition is inconsistent with union, or is it that equilibrium implies union at some point?
So there is conflict among scholars, you can say.
Okay.
Some scholars, they suggest that all these definitions are different facets of the same thing. So when you're in yoga, there will be union between the body, mind, etc. Your mind will be in harmony. And all these 7 definitions will be fulfilled. You see, that is one point of view. Another point of view says, all these are different definitions of yoga. Just like in English, you have different, the same word can mean different things in different contexts. The word light, for example. When you say light, are you talking about the brilliance, or are you talking about heavy versus light? You see? So there are different definitions of the same word. Some scholars talk about it this way. So when we are talking about the Yoga Sutras, we have to remember that yoga means equilibrium. So that's what it means. But it's up to you. You can understand it in both ways. And just like a lawyer, whatever point of view they hold, they will give you very convincing arguments, right? So you can find convincing arguments for both situations, whether these are all different facets of the same thing or different definitions of the same word.
Equilibrium of what?
Equilibrium of the mind. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Mind. Equilibrium of the mind. And of course, when we say mind, the mind and the body, although we think about them as separate entities, it's just one unit. The mind is just the subtle part of the body, and the body, the physical body, is just the physical part of the mind. It's ultimately one thing. So when there is samatvam in the mind, clearly there should be samatvam in the physical body as well.
When somebody asks what is yoga,
Mhm.
it's always, everybody says union. But Jaggi was there, here you see this kind of sort of different facets of meaning.
Yes.
It's very difficult to tell a layman, especially Westerners.
Yeah, we begin with maybe one definition and how the practices that we do in the yoga mat will bring more harmony in the body and mind. and then later on expand our perspective of what yoga is. Because if we overwhelm a beginning student with so many definitions, it will be like overeating, right? We are not ready for it.
For everybody, it's just YogaSutra, that's all. It's a physical aspect of yoga. But we are supposed to define this way, that way, it's not easy to sort of relate, especially in the Westerners.
So, in fact, one of the dhyana shlokas that Sumitra began this session, Yogena Chittasya, Padena Vacham, Alam Sharirasya cha Vaidyakena. That means Yogena Chittasya. Yoga is for the chitta, the mind. It doesn't say Yogena Sharirasya or Yogena Dehasya. It doesn't say yoga is for the physical body. It says yoga is for the chitta. That's why Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Patanjali says Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So equilibrium of the mind, samadhi for the mind. And why do we do postures then? If yoga is all about the mind, why should we do all these difficult postures, stand on our head and reach our toes and do back bends and all that? Why are we doing all that? Exactly. Because it has to serve the big picture, serve the ultimate objective of yoga, which is equilibrium of the mind. If it does not serve, that means we got sidetracked. If we get obsessed by doing more and more difficult asanas, and if you forget the true objective of yoga, then it is like somebody, you want to go from Dallas to Houston, and you take an exit and you forget about your destination, and you efficiently drive 80 miles, right? And for the upaya, as a remedy, you have to trace all the way back. You have to remove all the damage that you have done and come back to the path. So that is the self-discipline. So we have
to digress a little bit. I'm working with Southwestern Medical Center and also Baylor, cardiologist. Vyasa, Nagendra. So I happen to be a secretary for us now. When I was talking to them, their thing is about yoga therapy part of it. That's all. That means it's more of a physical aspect of it, and they don't even understand any of this. It's very hard to relate. Maybe people like you should give a little sermon before we jump into that. I think I'll do that a little later. But the problem is now, is it okay if I want to come in?
Sure.
Dr. Nagendra has got some 10 objectives. One of them was, of course, doing all YogaSanas. Yoga therapy is a big part of it, and to work with these hospitals. And when I was talking to a cardiologist, their interest is only therapy part of it, in which there is a rehab after the surgery, cardiac and cardiovascular patients. So purely, it's nothing to do with anything except we are doing a stress test and all that on treadmill. That's all we have. But we have to develop in such a way that yoga therapy should be part of it. But I think unless we inculcate some of these values or the mindset over days, it doesn't go very well. Because me and Dr. Venkatram, he's a hypertension specialist, and both of us are working. That's why I was asking Dr. Nagendra and also Dr. Maja. So Dr. Nagendra, now both of them are going to respond. But in the meanwhile, I was thinking we had to, I should say educate, but I'll say that, educate these professors. Little bit of the background and how it is defined. And ultimately, take yoga therapy as part of the bigger yoga itself. Maybe when it comes to that, I'll ask you to write something, so maybe one-page explanation. Because if they don't understand all this, it doesn't work. Yeah. Rehab is just physical part of it, but there's a lot of this inner meaning is involved.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Satyanji. You are right. In fact, yoga can be very effectively used as a therapy. Second chapter of the Yoga Sutras talk about how yoga can be used as a chikitsa. Chikitsa means as a therapy to target a specific condition. And what is it that differentiates yoga therapy versus, say, physiotherapy? In yoga therapy, we not only use the body, we also use the deeper levels of our existence. There are pranayamas, there are meditations, and there are practice, maybe listening to music or listening to a knowledge talk like this, or listening to devotional music. So attending to all 5 levels of our existence, the 5 koshas, that's an integral part of yoga therapy. So the combination of postures, breath work, and all these inner practices is extraordinarily powerful. They work in synergy. So when you combine them, the combination is more powerful than the mere sum of its parts. They work in synergy, right? Synergy means buy 2, get 1 free. Like 1 + 1 = 3. So by combining them, there is so much more power that comes. The combination is so powerful that when we introduce this combination in our life, it creates the space for exuberant health and happiness to happen, to unfold. And it also creates the platform for enormous personal growth. I keep saying this, some of you have heard this many times, right? This combination of postures, breathwork, and meditation is so powerful, active synergy. And this combination brings exuberant health, wellness, etc. In fact, the next sutra talks about what is health.
Actually, right now we are working with Day1 yoga therapy. There's a lady already working there.
Smitaji, yeah.
Huh?
Smitaji. Smita. Yeah.
The problem again, I think unless we put foundation, understanding yoga, all these professors and people who are the higher end, because he's going to look for some grants, and also he wants to, use the medical services as well as Medicare for both. It's a very big effort. It's unheard, so far in the medical history, communicating yoga. So it's a big challenge, I'll keep you in the loop of permission from Guruji. So that we have to make an interpretation of what exactly is therapy and how it's all related, and a little bit of background. It's not necessarily that it's a big ceremony.
Yes, in fact, as I said in the second chapter, Patanjali talks about a systematic approach. It's called the Vyuha model, Chatur Vyuha model, where he talks about what is the root cause, what is the remedy. So there are 4 parts to it: Hetuhu, Heyam, Hanam, and Upaya. There are 4 things. Maybe if you have time, tomorrow we'll examine each of these 4. It's very fascinating. So identifying the root cause, how to remove the root cause, what happens when you remove the root cause, and what are the remedial measures that we need to.
Working on this, do you know what she's doing?
Yeah, she's a great scholar in all this.
To relate to these patients and people who are managing that, they should understand that. That's how.
Yeah, we can talk about it offline. The yoga therapy program, for example, I'm a student right now. I'll be graduating soon with the yoga therapy program designed by Guruji, Dr. H.R. Nagendra. Yeah. From Yoga Bharti in the area.
I have a question. What are the 4?
The 4, we'll examine that in detail. So they are a quick summary. Hetu is the first one. Hetu means what is the root cause. Heyam means what is the symptoms. Symptoms. Heyam dukkham anagata. There's a sutra. We'll cover that tomorrow. Heyam means what is the symptoms. So sometimes the root cause could be in one part of the body. The Heyam, the symptoms can be expressed in some other part of the body. For example, low back pain. If you attend only to the low back, it's not going to help. The problem can be elsewhere in the body. Maybe it's in the mind. Maybe there's so much stress. And when the stress is relieved, the low back pain will also disappear. You see? So the root cause and the symptom can be 2 different places. And Hanam means what happens when the root cause is removed. How will it get expressed? What will be the change you will see? And then Upaya, the 4th one, is what are the remedial measures? What should you do to remove the root cause? In fact, Patanjali introduces the subject of Ashtanga Yoga as a upaya, as a remedial measure to remove avidya. Avidya means ignorance, which is the root cause for suffering. So we will look at it in more detail maybe in tomorrow's session. So we have
a question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, somebody else had.
we'll Anujaji,
Yeah.
you had a question?
Yes, sir. Shriramji, can you explain a little bit more about the spontaneity and impulsivity, the difference? Spontaneity, I could understand. It's a second nature. How yogis are kind and they're not thinking that what will be my outcome, my karma, satkarma, nothing they're thinking. It's out of their real good nature, second nature they act from. Impulsivity, I understand, in a way is like spur of the moment, but there is a huge difference. There's a subtle difference too. Can you please elaborate a little more on it, please?
Yes, thanks for pointing out. It's very subtle difference, right? Usually when we say impulse, that means we are swept away by the force of emotions, and it's an uncontrolled being swept away. We don't want to do it, but we do it. So, for example, we decide, I'm going to be a good person, I will never get angry, or I'll practice yoga every day. So we have all these very good intentions, right? I'll be a very kind person. But then some provocation happens, and Bhagavad Gita says, Vayur Nava Mivambasi. That means just like the boat is swept away by the wind, by hurricane, like that, our discernment of intellect, our intellect gets swept away. We know that it's not good to do it, but we do it anyway, right? In that moment, we are not even thinking, is it good or bad? The force of acting that is so great, we get swept away by it and we act it out. Arjuna asked the question, Ata kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha. What is it that makes me do things that I don't want to do? I don't want to do it. I don't want to be an angry person. But in certain situations, I do get angry. Why am I like that? What is it that drives me in that space? And Krishna gives answers to that question. We'll examine that maybe tomorrow's session. He says it's Rajoguna, Rajas. The word Rajas and the English word rage, they come from the same root, Rajoguna. And we will see how to overcome that. Whereas being spontaneous means we are still mindful. We are mindful. The mind is not calculating. I want to be kind, so let me do this. It's not running an algorithm in the mind. Mind is spontaneous, but because the mind is so filled with awareness, it is not like a machine. It is not like a robot. Being a robot or being a machine is being impulsive. Whereas being spontaneous means the mind is so full of awareness that we take the right decisions at the right time. You see, for example, in karate, so there are two expert, karate experts who are against each other, right? They cannot be calculating all the time, because when we are not spontaneous, each action will take some time. Should I do this or should I do that? So they cannot give their best. If you want to be really in a place of excellence in that situation, you need to be spontaneous. You cannot be impulsive, because being impulsive means you have trained the mind only in certain things. If the opponent strikes you in a move that you're not trained for, then we don't have a response for that. You see?
Yeah, I think most sports people are very spontaneous. Right? Like he may be like in cricket, like they might be standing at the far end of the field. Maybe the ball never comes to, and suddenly, ball is hit towards them, and they know enough to go hold it or catch it. So it's because the body is trained, or the mind is trained to be that spontaneous, or how they avoid getting hit. Yeah. I mean, they're hitting at like a certain speed, but they avoid getting hit. It's not like a person is coming out of every match being injured their entire body, because there is that again, they're not calculating exactly what speed is it coming, how much should angle should I deflect, but they know enough. So it's being trained to.
It's fascinating, right? In fact, they did, right now in this day and age, there's a lot of buzzwords around artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning and AI and all that. So in the early days, around the 1980s, they were training computers to play the game of chess so that they can compete with grandmasters and perhaps even defeat grandmasters, right? So how did they do the algorithms there? They will calculate how effective the next move will be by calculating for maybe next 20 moves, all possible combinations. And all possible combinations will be literally millions or even billions of moves. And for each of those moves, the computer will calculate. It's a supercomputer. It will calculate, is it effective, is it not effective? And then there's an optimizing program. What is the best move? And it will pick that. What they discovered was, because there are so many possible moves in chess, you quickly run out of memory, right? You cannot do trillion or bazillion. So they were wondering, how does a grandmaster think? Do they actually do this computation, every single move? What they discovered was the grandmaster, somebody who's so skilled in chess, they spontaneously think only about maybe 5 or 6 moves, not trillions of moves, 5 or 6 moves, and they will try to choose among them. Those 5-6 moves are all high quality moves. They immediately have an insight on what are the best moves possible. Somehow it comes to them through intuition or through experience. It just appears in their mind. It's very different from how a machine is trained by looking at all possible moves, right? So how to get to that space where whatever you think will be high quality thoughts. That's what we are talking about here, right? Whatever you think is high quality thoughts. An analogy that will help us understand what we are after is like a radio dial. Nowadays we use smartphones and whatever, but the olden days we used to have a radio dial, and you set the frequency to the corresponding radio station, and the music only from that station you will hear. So if you want to tune the mind to the place of high quality thought, Nobel Prize winning thought, grandmaster level thought, then what we are going to see is a tranquil state of mind. Samadhi state of mind will enable you to do that. We are tuning the mind. We can think of this as tuning the mind, so that whatever thoughts come into the mind will be high quality thoughts, like the grandmaster. They will not even think of not so good ideas. It will not even enter their mind. For example, a great sage, the thought of being unkind to somebody or to hurt somebody will not even come to their mind, because they are of such elevated state of mind. Injuring someone will not even come to their mind. So the thoughts that will come are all high quality thoughts. So that's what we are doing with Samadhi, tuning the mind.
I had a question going back to the point 2. We spoke about yoga is for the mind. I feel there is a small conundrum of of course the mind is important, but so a lot of activities of the mind are not measured, right? Like kindness, you can't measure, or any empathy, or or being brilliant also to a great extent cannot be measured. But a lot of activities of the body is measured. How fast you run, how many push-ups you can do is all very easily, it's very objective and measurable. And thus, for most common people, the body is the best way to be truthful to yourself. Like, you can't fool yourself that you can do 100 push-ups, because only if you can do it, you can do it. Otherwise, you cannot. But with the mind, it's easier to fool yourself, to say, I'm kind, because there is no perfect way to define it or measure it. So it's very easy to tell yourself, oh, but I'm a kind person. So this conundrum happens mostly with I'm not physically strong, but I'm mentally very strong. Where physical strength is very easily measurable, while mental strength, to some extent may be measurable, but to a great extent is beyond measurement. So how does one stay truthful without getting obsessed with the body, but to know that in the body there is a lot more objective truth to experience before you are elevated to a state where you are able to do that with your mind?
That's an amazing question, right?
Yeah.
Because mind is so subtle, you cannot experience the mind through the five senses. You cannot see the mind, you cannot hear the mind, you cannot touch the mind like that. So therefore, the mind, whether it is transformed or whether it's in a place of kind, how kind I am, can we give a scale for that? Just like body, you can do 100 push-ups, or it's very measurable, right? So what can we say for that? So first of all, so before we address the question, I hope when people ask questions, it's also audible in Zoom.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it is, and sometimes it is not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure to
Repeat the
repeat
question.
that.
Yes, thank you.
I think this question, it was audible, right?
Yeah, this
Because,
was clear.
she was-
Yeah, this was clear.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, I have a surprise for you. The body is not the most accurate way to measure. So let me mention why that is so. So let's take a step back. The practice of kindness, etc., is part of the Ashtanga Yoga. We're going to see that. The first practice in Ashtanga Yoga is ahimsa. Ahimsa is the first of the 5 yamas. And ahimsa means non-violence or being kind to everybody. So it is a practice. Kindness is a practice on its own. Now, when Patanjali talks about the body practices, namely asanas, he does not talk about any measurable things. If you are able to hold the asana for 3 hours, then you are perfect. If you are able to bend 360 degrees, or if you are able to touch your toes, you are perfected asana, and then you can move on to pranayama. He does not say that at all. The only thing Patanjali says about asanas is your inner experience. Are you able to feel sukham? Are you comfortable there? And are you able to keep the posture sthiram? Is the body stable? Is the body comfortable? Not just comfortable, enjoyable. So whether you touch your toes, whether you do 100 push-ups, Patanjali doesn't care. So the quality of your asana experience is not something that is externally measurable. It is an inner experience. Whether you are experiencing sukham or not, only the practitioner will know. Right? Okay. As a yoga teacher, what do? We have to trust the students, right? That they're enjoying the practice. You know, sometimes what happens in any yoga class, you have a mix of participants, different body types. There are some body types or types of the mind, vata, pitta, kapha, depending on the 3 Ayurvedic doshas. Pitta dosha, for example, they're highly competitive. They'll keep on looking at neighbors. Am I able to do a little better than the neighbor? And they will try to compete with them, even though it causes pain in the body. I said, no pain, no gain, right? My teacher used to say, no pain, all gain. In yoga, that is the mantra. No pain, all gain. So what they will do is, they will try to push themselves beyond the zone of comfort. I'm going to reach my toes. Even if it tears my hamstrings, it is okay. I've been in that place. That's why I'm saying that. I remember I pushed myself to touch the toes. I asked my sister to sit on my back when I was doing the seated forward fold. Paschimottanasana. And I was struggling, but I thought, okay, I was able to bear it. I did a lot of tapas today. But the real tapas came the next day. I was not even able to jump out of bed. Next day, the problem was more severe. I had to take off from school for the next couple of days. It was so bad. And so when people transgress the boundary of comfort, they can still fake a smile. So just by looking at the body, you might think, oh, it's a photogenic posture. You can take a picture and hang it on a wall or put it on Instagram. And you think it's a perfect posture, but they're struggling. So how does the yoga teacher determine whether they're doing the posture correctly or not? correctly in the sense of what Patanjali defines as yoga asanas. For that, Krishnamacharya, he has given a beautiful clue. What should you look for? Would you like to know? What should you look for? So you should look for the breath. The breathing will never lie. If you're struggling in a posture, the breath will be haphazard. So when you walk around the class, then is their breath even or non-uniform or haphazard? Are they struggling in their breath? That will be immediately evident. Sometimes in Zoom classes, it may not be possible. You cannot listen to their breath, but you can still see the movement, the respiration, the rib cage. You can actually make out. But that is a truer indicator of the quality of the asana experience than the body. So the breath will never lie. You cannot fake the breath, or at least for a long time. Impossible to do that.
I think the breath also indicates the state of mind.
Exactly.
Because when you're angry, you tend to breathe fast. When you're sad, you tend to breathe slow.
Hatha Yoga Pratipika gives the example of the two wheels of a cart. The breath and the state of the mind, they're always in sync. When one is fast, the other is also moving very fast. So the inner state, you can actually measure that using the breath. In fact, my teacher used to say that asana is primarily a breathing practice. Many people think asana is body practice, pranayama is breathing practice, but asana also is a breathing practice because we are shaping the body, we are positioning the body in a way that your breathing can still be sustained in the same even movement. Dirgha Sukshma is what Patanjali says. Dirgha, long, deep breath, and Sukshma, soft breath, not hurried or forced breath. So we watch for that breathing. How is the breathing in the asanas? Very key indicator. That is the more key indicator than how much we are able to reach or whether they can do 100 push-ups, etc.
I don't know, this is just a thought. Because every asana, it's derived from animals, right? The postures, animals or an object. So just thinking about it, every animal has a very intrinsic nature or quality where a particular emotion is very dominant. For in the nature of, like, the deer is very timid, and the nature of a tiger is to be fierce. So probably maybe I don't know, it's just a thought. When you get into that posture, is there trying to arrive at that samatvam in that posture from the emotion to the mind? It's just a question.
In fact, my teacher, the father, so he used to say, when you do a dog pose, for example, upward dog or downward dog, become a dog. That means imagine you are that. And this especially helps people who have a pet. To do cat pose, have a cat at home. It does asana every day. See, as human beings, we forget to do yoga. But our pets, they never forget. Their body's intelligence guides them into the practice of yoga. They're naturally inspired to practice yoga. So you're right. We learn yoga by looking at nature. The animals who are in tune with the body's intelligence. The mountains, the trees, tree pose, mountain pose. And also great sages. There are asanas named after great sages. Vasishthasana or Marichiyasana or Matsyendrasana, like that. Great sages. And they didn't go with a plan. Okay, let me try and derive or devise a posture. They went into the posture spontaneously. There was no calculation there. Spontaneous. Just like how a dog does upward dog, downward dog. There's no calculation. Nobody taught them. They're just doing it on their own. Even babies, you will see. They do all the postures spontaneously, right? Nobody taught them. Or you could argue maybe they were yogis in the past life, right? But all babies are yogis because they do all the postures. We have been blessed with that body's intelligence that guides us in the inner harmony, in the path of inner harmony. But we forget that. As my teacher used to say, when we become adults, we become adulterated, right? Our mind no longer remembers all this innocence or the body's intelligence, the guidance we ignore. There's more noise, more chittavrittis that drowns out the deeper messages, the more subtle messages that are coming from within. That gets warmed out. It's like you don't see the stars when there is bright sunlight. In order for the stars to appear, you need the sun to set. And in the clear night sky, you are able to see something more subtle that in daytime you could not see. So like that, when the chitta vrittis subside, there is something from within that comes up. That's a very beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti samyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyato munehe. It's a very famous shloka, second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. That means what is daytime for regular beings is night time for a sage, for a samyami, and the reverse. What is night time for the regular beings is the daytime. That means they are seeing all the stars or all the subtle things, they're able to sense them. So that is the reason chitta vritti nirodha. When we subside the chitta vrittis, we have access to intuition. We have access to creative thought. And those intuitive thoughts, they are of a much higher quality. Like I always give the example of Ramanujan, great mathematician. And his ideas came from intuition rather than logic. Usually when we step into the world of mathematics, they talk about proofs, long proofs, but they're all step-by-step logical constructions, right? But Ramanujan, great, one of the greatest mathematicians of all time, he worked very differently. When people asked him, can you prove what you just stated? He said, I don't have a proof, it's obvious to me. You figure out a proof for it. If it's not clear to you, you figure it out. And after 100 years, we are still trying to prove some of his formulae that he has left to the world. So flashes of insight appear when the chitta vritti has been subsided. So chitta vritti nirodha. Interesting. In close to 2 hours, we have completed 2 sutras.
Right. Shriramji,
Yeah.
It's a
Yes,
very interesting, very interesting. But when you were talking about this hetu, heyam, hanam, upaya, though you gave the example of backache, can you give the little subtler example? For example, jealousy. Okay, it is also negativity. Like how we say disease, is it no is in the body called disease. And the cause of the backache could be the stress factor, which could be in the mind. But how about the subtler disease? Like even any negativity is a disease. For example, jealousy is also a disease, though not be seen. But it is a deeper than the backache. In that case, how do the yoga chikitsa or something can help to find the root cause?
Yes, in fact, you are right. Just because physically everything appears okay, but if there is mental dis-ease or when the mind is trapped in one of the 6, Mada, Matsarya, Kama, Krodha, etc. There are 6 of them. So that is also a dis-ease of the mind. And Patanjali calls it dhyana. It's an impediment in the practice of yoga. Vyadi is the first, which is a physical ailment, and dhyana is all these mental modifications that bring dis-ease in the mind. So Patanjali, he presents a very amazing idea. He says, regardless of what the dis-ease is, whether it's in the body level or in the mind level. For example, we talked about low backache. Perhaps the low back pain is coming from stress in the mind. So ask the next question. Why did the stress in the mind appear? And you will find some cause. Maybe boss was angry or whatever. And if you keep tracing back, why this? And this process of tracing back to the source is called pratiprasava. This is one of the sadhanas that is mentioned in the 2nd chapter of the Yoga Sutras, pratiprasava. Te pratiprasava heya sukshmaha is the sutra. So pratiprasava, when you trace back to the original source, Patanjali reveals an amazing insight. Whatever is the condition, in the body or the mind. When we go back, you will find only one answer. There is the same root cause for all ailments. That's very good news, right? That means the one key can open the door to all therapy. Only one thing you need. So what is the root cause? Tasya hetuhu avidya. Tasya hetu. Hetu means the root cause, right? Ignorance. Ignorance is the root cause of everything. For example, I want to be happy. So let me eat well. Let me buy a lot of cushion. Let me keep the physical body fit. What are we doing there? We are assuming that I am my body. So that is avidya there. That is ignorance of the true nature of the self. So what people do is they make the body so comfortable and they become comfortably unhappy. You see, that is one of the problems in this day and age, right? So much comfort and comfortably unhappy. A yogi seeks the true happiness. They seek who I truly am and let me feed that rather than attending to the comforts only of the body. Why did that association with the body take place? It is because of avidya. And avidya is the first of the 5 kleshas. We will talk about that in tomorrow's session, kleshas. So that is the root cause of everything. So when we attend to this root cause, avidya, then all the weeds that have grown from this one root cause will all be cured. You see, that is why the Sanskrit word for health is swastha. Swastha. That means swa means self. Stha means to stand there, to abide in self, not abide in the body. We think I am the body, so let me bring comfort to the body. That is not swastha. Whereas abiding the true nature of the self, swastha, is when it's like a tree, when it's rooted to the ground, then it is connected to the source of nourishment. If you uproot a tree, it will wither away, right? That's what is happening to us. We are not being rooted. We are not abiding in ourselves. So health in Sanskrit is swastha. In fact, that is what the 3rd sutra is about. That's a nice segue to our next sutra. So Patanjali says, so when you look at the 3rd sutra, what is the result of being in the state of chitta vritti nirodha, right? And then we'll come back to the other definitions of yoga as well. I think we are still incomplete in that. So the 3rd sutra, what Patanjali says is, tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. That means when the chitta vritti nirodha, when the activities of the mind have been silenced, when the monkey mind has become a meditative mind, quiet mind, tranquil mind, then swastha happens. Patanjali expands the word swastha as swarupe avasthanam. Swastha becomes swarupe avasthanam. Tada. Tada means then. Kada, when? Yada chitta vritti nirodha asti or bhavati, tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. So whenever there is chitta vritti nirodha, then the seer abides in the nature of the self. That is when swastha happens. We are rooted. The tree is rooted. It gains its nourishment from the roots. It's happy. So exuberant expression of health happens when we are abiding in ourselves. Swastha, swarupe avasthanam. You see? It makes sense, right? If that is not so, if the chitta vrittis are running rampant in the mind, what happens in that case? Then vritti sarupyam itaratra. Itaratra means otherwise. Otherwise, vritti sarupyam. We are caught up in the nature of the vrittis. We are caught up in the appearances or the illusions of the vrittis. And we will examine this a little later after the short break. Maybe it's time for a break, right? The time now is 3:54. Perhaps we will take a quick 8-minute break and we'll start sharp at 4:02.
Yeah,
Sure.
Shriramji, it's flowing. It's flowing like a
Right.
river. And one of the beautiful insights that I was observing in one of the chats, Shriramji, let me introduce, I don't know if she's there, Dr. Malladi, who also joined. She's a bariatric surgeon. And she said, while listening to you, she said, this knowledge needs to be taught in all the schools at a very young age. What a brilliant insight. So everybody, let's take a quick break and we'll meet in 5-10 minutes.
Thank you so much for your enthusiasm. We'll be back at 4:03. It's already 3:55 now. 4:03.
And Sriniji, Ramji, are we going to get the recording? Because we would love to hear you and absorb it.
Oh, the recording.
Yes, please.
Yes. I will check with Sriniji. I think the sessions are being recorded.
Yes, it is
So,
getting recorded, but are we going to get it even for few weeks also if we get it? Few weeks, few months, whatever you all decide. But it would be a
yes,
big
we'll
help.
make that happen. Yes.
Thank you. It will be a big help. Thank you so much. It's a very interesting.
Awesome. So welcome back, everyone. I'll just chant the first 4 sutras that we covered. Om Patanjala Yoga Sutra Pathaha Prathamodhyayaha Samadhipadaha Atha Yoganushasanam Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodhaha Tadadrashtu Swarupe Vasthanam Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra. So these are the first 4 sutras. Chatussutri, the 4 sutras where Patanjali captures the essence of the Yoga Sutras. It's like the abstract.
In progress.
So we already looked at the meaning of the 4 sutras, but I would like to delve a little more. There is more to unpack. We're not fully done yet. We can't go to the 5th sutra before we uncover a little bit more. So let's examine what this word chitta means. Chitta. We have been translating the word chitta as the mind, but there is more to the story. Chitta has many definitions. I'm going to present 3 definitions for the chitta. So before I mention the Sanskrit definition, one thing we can think of as the chitta is the world enters the self through the chitta. The world enters itself, it makes its presence felt through the chitta. In fact, through the chitta vrittis. We experience the world through the chitta vrittis. So let us look at an example to make the idea clear. Suppose we see an object. Let us pick an object, pot. Let us think of an object called pot. Pot is a vastu. Vastu means it's an object, it's a thing. Vastu, it's a pot. How do we perceive that pot? So when we open our eyes, the eyes do not see the pot directly, right? Eyes are just a window. It is just an instrument that allows the light from the pot to enter. And the image of the pot appears in the back of the eye, the retina, right? It's an inverted image, inverted pot actually. And the optic nerves sense that image that is presented in the back of the eye. And the optic nerves send the signal to the brain. And there's some processing that is done. And ultimately, the self, the Purusha, the self has many names. You can call it Atman. There are many meanings for the word Atman. Let me give 2 meanings for the word Atman. One meaning is Atman and the word atom, they come from the same root. That which is indivisible. You cannot cut the Atman. Nainam chindanti shastrani, Bhagavad Gita says. I think it's shloka number 22 of the 2nd chapter. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dadi pavakaha. You cannot cut the Atman. You can dissect the body. That is why the science of dissecting the body is called anatma or anatomy. Anatomy comes from that root, anatma. Atma means you cannot cut it. For like atom was supposed to be the smallest indivisible unit. But now we know there are subatomic entities. But at that time, when the word atom was coined, you cannot divide it further. So Atman means indivisible. It also means that which experiences things, that which is the bhokta or the experiencer. In the context of Sankhya and Yoga, Atman is a consumer or experiencer. when you go to Vedanta, we will notice it is neither a karta nor a bhokta. That means it's neither a doer nor an experiencer, it's a witness. But as far as science of yoga and Sankhya are concerned, Atman is a bhokta, consumer, but it is not a karta, it is not doing anything. So these are all some subtle differences. Maybe we can get to it in one of the future sessions. So At iti Atman. At means that which is consuming. Consumer is the Atman. So the Atman, which is also called the Purusha. Purusha means Purasya Ishaha. That means the indwelling entity that lives in this Pura. Pura means city, like Hastinapur, Nagpur, different names of cities. So this Pura means the body, and the Isha, the indweller or the controller of this body, is called the Purusha. It's a different name for Atman. It is also called the Dehi. Dehi means that which lives in the Deha. Like Yogi is one who practices yoga. Dehi is the indweller in the Deha, the body. And also another word that Patanjali uses a lot for Atman is Drashta. That's why you see Tada Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam. Drashta means the seer. It is constantly seeing, watching. What is the Purusha watching? So we are looking at a pot right now, right? That's where we began this discussion. Pot. We are not looking at the pot directly. What the Purusha is doing is, it is looking at the impression, the vritti that is created in the chitta as a result of the optic nerves sending the signal there. It is like you're watching what is happening in the outside world through a surveillance camera. And on your TV screen, you're seeing what's happening outside. Like that, the Atman, although it's thinking that it's watching a pot outside, it is actually seeing the chitta. Chitta is like the screen where the chitta vritti, the impression of the pot, appears in the screen of the chitta. It's like the TV screen in which everything else that we experience outside is showing up. It's like a surveillance camera. The chitta is like the screen or the canvas where we receive the world from outside.
And I read something. You cannot see your face directly, but you can only see it in the mirror.
Correct.
So you can experience the face, but you can't see it directly. So Purusha is probably like that, where you can't see it directly,
Yes.
but you can see it through a mirror or
Yes.
the
In
chitta.
fact, Purusha cannot be seen even using a mirror.
Okay.
Because Purusha is so subtle, it will not even leave a chitta vritti impression. What the vrittis are revealing to you is like a pot outside, or some subtle thought. It could be an idea, say a formula in mathematics, where it doesn't have a physical counterpart outside, but it's a subtle thought. But all of them appear in the canvas of the chitta. So the only thing the Purusha is doing is keep on watching what is happening in the chitta. My teacher used to jokingly say, the Purusha is like the Indian householder. The only thing they do is sit and watch TV, right? And all the hard work is done by others. So like that, Purusha does nothing. It's not a karta. It is not doing anything. And constantly it is watching what is happening in the screen of the chitta. And what it is watching is the chitta vrittis, all the activities of the mind it is watching. So unless the pot appears as a pot vritti in the mind, you cannot perceive that pot. For example, an owl can see things that humans cannot see. Dog can hear something that human ear cannot transmit. So unless the vritti is registered in the chitta, you don't even perceive it. So ultimately, the point of this is we experience everything by watching the screen of the chitta. Makes sense, right? Now, imagine what happens if you think of the chitta as a mirror. So you're driving your car by looking at the rear view mirror or some device that is telling you what is in front of you, in your side, etc. Like in the like a Tesla car, for example. So when it is doing automatic or self full self-driving, then it is perceiving all the images and it is making corrections and it is driving itself. So the point is, when the chitta becomes distorted, what happens is, whatever it's reflecting from the outside world is a distorted reflection. Would you agree?
Yes.
For example, let us think of a different vastu, different object. Think of a rope. You see a rope and it appears as a snake and we get afraid, right? Oh my God, there's a snake. And there are physical things that happen in the body. Fear strikes. We are in a fight or flight mode. Heartbeat goes up. We breathe faster. We are sweating. It's a harmless rope. But the vritti that suggests that it's a snake causes all these physiological reactions to happen in the body, right? And there's a anxiety or fear that strikes the mind. So what is happening in this case? There is a rope vastu, but snake vritti. Rope vastu, snake vritti. By the way, these are names. A pot vastu creating a pot vritti is called pramana. That means the vritti and the vastu are in agreement. They are in agreement. When the vritti and the vastu are not in agreement, it becomes viparyaya. Right? Viparyayo mithya jnanam. It's a myth. In Sanskrit, the word used is mithya. Mithya and English word myth, same thing. So the snake is a myth. The truth is a rope, but in the screen, it is presented as a snake. And why is it presented as a snake?
Can you see that word again when the two are not in agreement?
Viparyaya. Viparyaya. In fact, Patanjali classifies the vrittis, the chitta vrittis, into 5 types. And they are pramana. Pramana means there is agreement between the vastu and the vritti. Second is viparyaya. Viparyaya means the vastu and the vritti, they are not the same. You think you're seeing a snake, but in reality, it is a rope. So that is viparyaya. There's another possibility. There is no vastu outside. Your chitta manufactures something and presents it to you. There's nothing outside, like fantasy or hallucination or imagination or even dream. In a dream, there's a tiger that is chasing. There is no corresponding entity outside, right? So Shabda Jnana Anupati Vastu Shunyo Vikalpaha. This is called Vikalpa. That's a third type of Chitta Vritti. Vikalpa means Vastu Shunya. There's no Vastu outside, but there's a Vritti there.
Yeah.
It is manufactured by the Chitta. So this is called Vikalpa. And the fourth Vritti is there. There are 5 Vrittis. The fourth one is Nidra. Nidra means it is the Vritti that corresponds to Ajnana. Ajnana. It is like you have this screen where the whole movie is taking place. If we close the screen, and that is how Nidra appears as. Although Vastu is there outside, but you don't see the Vritti because the screen is closed. So behind the scenes, some drama is happening, right? But you don't see the Vritti because you're seeing the screen. You're not seeing the Vastu. So this is called Nidra. So this is Ajnana Vritti, which is Nidra. And then the 5th Vritti is called Smriti or memory, where a past event, past experience is still having this trail. It is activating that vritti. You remember something from the past.
Anubhuta Vishaya
Asampramoshaha smritihi. Anubhuta Vishaya asampramoshaha. Asampramoshaha means not getting erased. It persists over time. Or you are activating it. You are making it persist. So that is called smriti.
Anna, imagination, it says Shabda Jnananupati.
Anupati vastu shunyaha.
Which means there is sound, there is
no
sound.
Because he uses the word shunya. Vastu shunya.
There is no
shunya.
vastu, there is no object. But in imagination, it feels, for example, dream is still a state of imagination, right?
Yes, it's an imagination, but just because it is imagination.
But there is, you feel sound, you feel object, but
Yes.
it's actually not tangible and it's not real.
It's not, there's no physical thing that corresponds to that vritti. So that is vikalpa.
Okay.
Vikalpa and the word kalpana, they come from the same root, kalpa. Kalpana means imagination.
Imagination.
So vikalpa. So vividha kalpana is vikalpa. Vividha means a variety of imagining things. Vividha. So vikalpa means there is a vritti, but there is no vastu outside, right? Now we should not disregard vikalpa because artists and people who are very creative, they revel in vikalpa. They think of things that are not yet in the reality. Steve Jobs was able to imagine an iPhone. It was not there in the real world, but he made it real. It started out as a vritti, it became a vastu later. You see? So like that, you can actually use all of these 5 vrittis for useful purpose or for detriment. So these 5 vrittis, we experience the entirety of our life through these 5 vrittis. These 5 vrittis can ultimately be reduced into 2 vrittis. What are the 2 vrittis?
Right understanding, wrong understanding.
Klishta and aklishta.
Klishta, klishta. Colored and not colored.
Klishta means that which brings misery or kleshas. And aklishta means those vrittis that don't bring misery. So ultimately these 5 vrittis are there, right? Pramana, Viparya, Vikalpa, Nidra and Smriti can be reduced to 2. That which creates sadness or misery and that which doesn't create sadness or misery. And here is the punchline that Patanjali gives. Would you like to know? Are you ready for it? Patanjali says these 2 klishta and aklishta vrittis can be reduced to 1 vritti, which is called dukkham. Every vritti, you cannot experience joy from the vrittis. Ultimately, everything is dukkham. Dukkham eva sarvam vivekinaha is what he says in the 2nd chapter. This appears in the 2nd chapter. Parinama tapa samskara dukkhaihi guna vritti virodascha dukkham eva sarvam vivekinaha is the full sutra. Dukkham eva sarvam. A vivekinaha, a person with a discerning intellect, a sharp intellect. They're able to come to the conclusion that ultimately all of these vrittis produce dukkham.
Even
so
the
what
ones
is
that gave you happiness?
No, Patanjali doesn't say it gave you happiness. He just says it doesn't give you unhappiness. You see, he says klishta vritti and aklishta vritti. He didn't say sukha vritti. You see, klishta vrittis means those vrittis that give you misery. Aklishta vrittis means those vrittis that don't give you misery. He never says vritti that gives you joy. So the true happiness, you have to transcend the vrittis. That is why chitta vritti nirodha. That state of chitta vritti nirodha will allow you to settle down in that place where you abide in the self. Self is the true source of happiness. You see? So let us get back to our mirror analogy. I hope this is clear so far. Right? It's very interesting, right? Very fascinating how beautifully Patanjali has analyzed.
In that 5 vrittis, is there any difference between sleep and nidra and smriti?
The same.
And
Sleep
memory?
and nidra is the 4th vritti.
Is the same thing smriti? I mean, sleep and nidra is the same thing?
Yes,
sleep is passive sleepy, right? And the yoga nidra is a nidra. Is there a difference between sleep and nidra?
Sleep is nidra.
Okay.
And according to this definition, dream state would classify as vikalpa because shabda jnananupati vastu shunyo vikalpa. And then abhava pratyaya alambana tamovrittir nidra. That's a sutra for nidra. Abhava pratyaya. Pratyaya word is very important. Pratyaya means the scenery that is presented in the screen of the chitta in that moment is called pratyaya. What is it that the Purusha is seeing in that instant of time? That snapshot. So you're watching a movie. In that instant of time, what is the scene that is showing up in the movie screen? So that is called pratyaya. This word is very important. We will come back to it when we talk about meditation later. He uses this word in nidra. Nidra, the pratyaya that is showing up is tamo vrittihi, tamas. Tamas vritti. Tamas means darkness. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, right? Tamas means darkness. So when the chitta screen is covered with dark vritti, darkness, that's what we are calling as a screen that covers the chitta, that is experienced as sleep. You can't say it's no vritti. It is a vritti of ajnana. It is still a vritti. You see, it's not chitta vritti nirodha. We have not transcended the vrittis in sleep. We cannot say that.
It's still happening behind the screen.
Exactly. And the screen itself is a vritti. That's the point here. You have not transcended the vrittis. You have just replaced one vritti with another vritti. Sleep vritti is taken over.
So I have a question. If the Purusha is experiencing or intaking the world through vrittis, then existing in the world is equal to dukkha. Because if we, later on, if we say that all vrittis lead to dukkha, then existing in the world leads to dukkha.
So
Is equal.
you can see how this can be misconstrued as a very pessimistic view, right? So what is Patanjali's point here? Patanjali's point is you are looking for happiness in all the wrong places. If you're trying to look for happiness in the chitta vrittis, okay, let me change things outside and then I'll be happy. It's not going to work, because once we reorganize the external world, we are back to the same place and we need the next thing that will make us happy. You see? So we have to transcend the chitta vrittis. So how can we use the chitta vrittis? Or to extrapolate, how can we use the world? Because the world presents itself to us through the chitta vrittis. So what should be our relationship with the world, with the prakriti, right? And Patanjali talks about that in the second chapter. I'll mention what he says, how to use the world. Would you like to know?
Yes.
How to use the world, right? So there are two ways in which we can use the prakriti. Patanjali says, one is bhoga. Bhoga means continued experiences. Either sukha or dukkha. Of course, true sukha is coming only from the self, but we can say pleasure and pain. Short-lived pleasure means it's an ephemeral thing. It's not a continuous happiness that a yogi feels, but what a bhogi feels. Bhogi feels some pleasure. And then there are consequences later. We eat junk food and later we have to suffer the consequences. So that is bhoga. And the second way in which we can use the same prakriti is apavarga. Apavarga means to come out of bondage, to free ourselves. It is a path towards, or a ladder for kaivalya. You see, we can use the same prakriti for more and more entertainment of bhoga, like a merry-go-round. Right? One of my teachers, Sri Ravi Shankar, he says, this merry-go-round going around in circles, like samsara of this world going around in bhoga. You cannot even say it's a merry-go-round, because it's not even merry. It's just a go-round, going round and round. And if you really want to use the prakriti for what it's intended for, use it for apavarga, as a ladder to come out of the clutches of prakriti. In other words, don't disregard prakriti, use the prakriti to experience the kevalasya bhavana, the kaivalya. Makes sense, right? Now let's come back to the mirror or the screen analogy. You can think of, when you look at an object outside, like a pot, the pot vastu appears as a pot vritti, right? Or a rope vastu, ideally it should appear as a rope vritti, but sometimes it appears as a snake vritti. That's called Rajju Sarpa Bhranti. It's an illusion. It's a classic example they give in so many scriptures, right? Rope and a snake. Now, it's like saying there's a convex or a concave mirror in front of me. When I look at my reflection, by my reflection, I'm saying the body's reflection. So be very careful here when you talk about me, my reflection. Here we're talking about the body's reflection. If the mirror is not perfectly shaped, if it is a concave mirror, we see a bigger, rounder version of ourselves. That can give either sukha or dukkha. It's up to you how you take it, right? Or it might have a big nose. If the mirror is curved in a way, you can make yourself have a big nose, or one ear is bigger than the other ear, or one eye is bigger than the other. So you can produce all kinds of distortions, right? What the chitta, or actually what the buddhi does is, it assumes that is the real me. I am somebody who has 1 ear bigger than the other ear. I am somebody who has a big nose. In reality, it is not like that at all. It's a distorted form of reality. You see, that is what the fourth sutra says. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. Otherwise, we assume that the chitta vrittis are the reality. What the mirror is showing you is real. The distorted mirror shows you a distorted reflection of the self. The distortion can happen in two ways. It can be a convex or a concave or a curved mirror, or it is a partial mirror. Maybe it is covered with partial dust. You see only part of yourself. You see, or it obfuscates the image and shows you a distorted or an obfuscated version of yourself, and we assume that to be true. Oh, I don't think I'm capable of acquiring this skill. I don't have the talent for that. If somebody decides like that, what are they doing? They're looking at the vritti. Maybe in the past experience, they failed at something. By failure, I mean through some objective, like what the vrittis are presenting. And if we assume that to be true, what happens? We are assuming a distorted version of ourselves is the truth. You see? Now, when we recognize the truth of who we are, if the chitta is undistorted and it's perfectly reflecting, then you'll always be happy with what you see. The truth will always be happy. The truth shall set you free, as they say, right? Truth shall set you free. If you see the truth, if the chitta is cleansed, when the chitta vrittis have been silenced, chitta vritti nirodha, the chitta will now present the truth. And when you see the truth, you will be happy. This statement that truth will always uplift you and take you to samadhi comes from the foundation of yoga, which is called Sankhya. You have heard of the word Sankhya, right? What is Sankhya? Sankhya is actually the underlying philosophy. Patanjali assumes that the reader of the Yoga Sutras is familiar with Sankhya. There are classic Sankhya texts. There's a Sankhya Karika. There are 70 or 72 verses, the Sankhya Karika text that lays out the foundations of Sankhya. There are two key things that we need for Sankhya. The first is, anytime our mind is entertaining negative emotion, we're having a bad experience, the mind is in the place of suffering, dukkha, that means for sure we are not seeing the truth as it is. The chitta is distorted. For sure, you can take it for guarantee. It's a very bold statement by Sankhya. It's profound, right? Any experience of negative emotion or dukkha is because the chitta is not presenting the truth to you. It is showing a rope as a snake, and we are being afraid of a snake, which is not there. So that is one statement. And there's a corollary to it. If you see the truth, you will be in samadhi. That means you will have the most blissful experience. Remember, yoga is samadhi, equilibrium, samadhi. So if we refine the chitta so that there is no distortions, it's presenting the truth to you, then you'll be in samadhi. Because what you see will be so uplifting that you'll have the most blissful experience. It's profound, right? In fact, the word Sankhya means samyak khyayate prakashyate vastu tattvam anaya iti Sankhya. This definition comes from one of the great scholars, a commentator of the Bhagavad Gita by name Sridhara Swami, who lived about 500 years back. He wrote an extensive commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and this definition of Sankhya appears in the commentary to the 2nd chapter, 39th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, which says, Esha te bihita sankhye buddhir yoget vimam shrunu. So, Esha te abhita sankhye. Whatever I have talked to you so far, the previous verses, first half of the 2nd chapter is called Sankhya. And in order to define what is Sankhya, Sridhara Swami, he gives this definition. Samyak khyayate. That means correct understanding or correct perception. When there is zero distortion in the chitta, when you are seeing things as they are, when the reflection presents the perfect replica of reality, then it is samyak khyayate. And then prakashyate vastu tattvam anaya iti. Vastu tattvam, all the vastus are presented in the correct form without a distortion. So this type of understanding is called Sankhya. And when there is zero distortion, when what you see is what you get, visivik they say, right? What you see is what you get. And Patanjali uses the word Sankhya in a different form. He uses the word Viveka Khyati. So Sankhya is Samyak Khyati or Samyak Khyayate. And Patanjali uses the word Viveka Khyati. Same thing. He uses the word many times. Viveka Khyati in the Yoga Sutras. So what is the summary of this? When the chitta vrittis are silenced, there is no distortion in the chitta. So the mirror becomes a perfect mirror. It is showing you the perfect replica of reality. And when you see the truth, not a distorted truth, but the real, absolute truth, it will set you free. You will be in samadhi.
So I have a question. So we said yoga chitta vritti nirodha, right? So, and chitta is how you and how the self understands the world. And vritti is the mirror of that. So
Vritti is the
activities of the mind, yeah,
of the chitta, whatever you see in the chitta.
yeah. So which is like a screen, correct? So but yoga means to take away that screen or the vritti.
Take away the scenery. Screen is still there.
Okay.
Screen is the chitta.
Okay. Okay. Vritti you're taking away.
Yes.
The scenery is the vritti.
Yes. It's like remove the sunlight and the stars will show up. You are able to see something that was drowned because chitta vrittis were there. So you're able to see something very subtle. You're able to know who you are. That reveals itself. Otherwise, the chitta vrittis will block them or drown them out. You cannot listen to soulful music when there is a lot of noise.
And is the scenery not pramana?
Scenery is a mix of all the 5 vrittis.
It's a mix of
Yes.
the vrittis.
All the vrittis will
So
be
it is
there.
made up
Pramana.
of vrittis, basically. Okay.
The
So
scenery
the
is,
vritti can either be klesha or aklesha.
yes. Klishta or aklishta is the
Oh,
word.
sorry, klishta or aklishta.
Vrittayaha panchataya klishta.
klishta.
Klishtaha is a sutra. So panchataya, the 5 vrittis, can either be klishta vrittis or aklishta vrittis. Makes sense, right?
Sriram,
So this is the foundation of the yoga.
Sriram,
Yes, Sriniji.
Or the vrittis need to be eliminated so that the only screen remains, or this vrittis be regulated? Where we have
So
control.
that's a good question.
What is
So-
the question? Sorry.
So the question is, are we regulating the chitta or are we silencing the chitta? Right? Is that a correct understanding of your question, Sriniji?
Yes.
So when the chitta is quiet, when the chitta vrittis have been transcended, it can help us in 2 ways. One is it can help us in understanding the empirical reality, what is happening outside. We are watching a tree and we are seeing a tree vritti. We are watching a rope, we are seeing the rope vritti, not a snake vritti, right? The second thing is it will allow us to listen to ourself. The light of the self will be obvious, will be evident when the chitta vrittis are silenced. So in 2 ways it helps. In a practical way, that in our day-to-day life, the mind doesn't deceive itself. The second way is it reveals the nature of the self to us. That revelation of the self, later on, Patanjali talks about that as, so when we talk about pramana, right? Pramana is the first of the 5 vrittis. Pramana itself is of 3 types. Patanjali talks about that. One is called pratyaksha pramana. Pratyaksha means that which is visible through the senses. What you see, hear, taste, smell, or touch. Pramana vritti. Second is anumana vritti. Anumana means inferential. So you don't see the fire, but you see smoke, but you infer that there is fire. So you are using the intellect to make some logical conclusions. For example, you don't see that lion, but you hear a roar, still you get afraid, right? So that which is processed through intellect and logically, it allows us to come to conclusions. That is anumana vritti. And the third one is agama vritti. Agama pramana. Agama pramana means that which you trust experts' opinion. For example, people tell you that there are subatomic particles, proton, electron, neutron, and all that. Now, have you really experienced it? Or have we even logically convinced ourselves? We have not done that. We just assume. In fact, a lot of things we assume for granted. When we step into an airplane, we are assuming, we are having the faith, the shraddha, it's called shraddha, that people know what they are doing, right? So that is called agama pramana. We trust the words of the rishis, we trust the words of the scientists, etc. Some authoritative figure. And later on, in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali talks about another pramana, which called yogika pramana. Yogika pramana, which means it's like a yoga drishti. It awakens intuition in you. Intuition. It is what is called the intuitive or creative, not creative, sorry, intuitive power. Ritam bhara tatra pragya, shruta anumana pragyabhyam anya vishaya visheshar tattvat. Ritam bhara. Ritam means the absolute truth, not transactional truth, whether it's a cat or a dog, or whether it's a rope or a snake. That's all relative truth. But who am I? What is the nature of the universe? That higher truth is called Ritam. So Ritam Bhara Tatra Pragya, the Pragya, the mind is filled with higher truth, universal truth. So that pramana that comes, which is extrasensory, is called Yogika Pramana. And that is open to those yogis who are in certain stages of samadhi, nirvichara samadhi in this case. So, yeah, why did I say that? Maybe that was a question. Maybe I was trying to answer Sriniji's question. Okay.
We were talking about pramana.
Oh yes, pramana. So the point is, in the screen, you have a mix of all vrittis.
Okay.
Now his question was whether we are
Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, Pramana. The order in which it's actually stated, the Pratyaksha is something that is directly experienced.
Yes.
Anumana is inference. And Agama is in the Shastras. So I also read somewhere that first you directly experience it and then you confirm it with the inference and then you reconfirm it going back to the Shastra. So the art of yoga is something that you need to directly experience instead of just learning from the book, inference, and then going, rather than going to the experience, you try to go from the experience to the inference to the Shastras and to validate that experience and to make sure that the understanding is correct. This is something that I read. So is that right?
It makes sense. In fact, when we read some of these, right, the different states of samadhi, we process it through our intellect. Maybe Patanjali is making sense, but I'm not able to experience it, right? So one of the definition of yoga that you see, remedies to quiet the mind in order to experience those states that we talk about. So manah prashamana upayaha yoga iti abhidiyate. This definition of yoga comes from Yoga Vasishtam. So all the practices, all the remedies, all the devices, techniques, tricks, whatever you use in order to bring the mind to experience what we conceptually know in the intellect is also called yoga. So in the Agama, in the scriptures, or scientists, when they say that you can transform the state of your mind, if you do these breathing practices, then you can change the state of the mind. So doing those practices, those upayas, and experientially having that knowledge rather than just conceptually having an understanding at the intellectual level. So that is also equally important. Sometimes in Agamas, you see some grand claims. Patanjali says in the 3rd chapter, for example. So when you progress in the path of yoga, you can read other people's minds, right? So I know what you are thinking now. No, I don't. So Patanjali says that great yogis have that power. They have great siddhis. They can travel great distances. They can ashta siddhis they talk about. So all those siddhis come into the experience. But we hear it. Maybe it makes sense conceptually too. Perhaps it's possible. We're open to that idea. But it's not in my experience, right? So how to do that? For that, all these upayas are there. So that is another definition of yoga. So once we complete this subject, we'll go back to these definitions of yoga. So any question? Yeah. Yes, Anujaji?
We are regulating the mind through yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. So vrittis are getting regulated or getting quieting down the mind. It's happening through yoga. But this mind is still existing, the chitta is still existing, the screen is still existing. Only vritti's power, vritti's encroachment, latching to the vritti decreases. What is it? What
yes,
happens?
that's a nice way of putting it. We are not trying to vanquish or suppress the vrittis. We are trying to transcend the vrittis. Vrittis can be there. The mirror can be distorted. But you know intellectually that although my right ear appears bigger than the left ear, I know it's a trick that is played by the mirror. So it doesn't have a debilitating effect on you. You see, another analogy that they give is, in the surface of the ocean, there's a lot of waves. You can think of it as a turbulent vrittis. But when you go deep into the ocean, it's so calm, very tranquil. So we are tuning the mind, attunement of the chitta. We talked about the radio dial before, right? We are tuning the mind to resonate with the place of tranquility rather than the vrittis. Vrittis can still go on in some other radio channel. But we are tuning the mind to be in that place of tranquility. So we are transcending the vrittis.
So our state of, it's more like our state of joyful is there regardless of the vritti.
We choose to stay in the Purusha.
In the Purusha.
In other words, yes, vrittis can be there, but they no longer deceive the self. We know that it is a rope, not a snake.
Yeah, we transcend this notion of pleasure or pain. We're always in that samatva. We're always joyful.
And how we experience it or process it will be different.
Yeah.
Or we know it is a snake and we are still okay.
That can also be possible. Yes. For example, one could be so sure that I am not the body that when they see a snake, they're not even perturbed. Or at the most, the snake can bite me and I will throw this body and acquire a new body. Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse, right? Vasamsi jirnani atha vihaya navani grinnati naroparani. That means, I think this is verse number 19, 20, that neighborhood of the 2nd chapter. So we discard the used body like a used garment, and then we acquire a new garment. So like that, this is to show that I am not the body. So when something happens to the body, then don't get perturbed, because we will have endless opportunities to acquire new garments, new bodies. It doesn't mean be indifferent to the body. Otherwise, we will not even be practicing asanas, right? Why should we honor the body, respect the body. In fact, the practice of asanas is to honor the body, listen to the body, respect the body, keep the body in a healthy manner, as if, not as if, truly the body is a temple that houses the self. Because the body is in proximity to the self. That is why the value of the body is there. It's a temple that houses the self. So that is why we keep the body in a healthy way. We honor and respect the body because it is the instrument with which we receive the world, and it is the instrument with which we express with the outside world.
I
So,
think it's
Sri
also to
Ramji,
see
sorry.
the self that is in you, in every creature, every tree, and even the snake. I think in Abhijnana Shakuntalam, in the ashram, even what to say, usually a peacock and a snake, they are naturally enemies, but over there they are friends. There is, because the vibration of the place and everything is in balance, that there is no hatred at all. Everything is in union. So
Yes.
probably that is what
In fact, you are right. Patanjali talks about that. For a sage who is established in ahimsa, in their presence, there cannot be any violence. Ahimsa pratisthayam tatsannidau vaira tyagaha is what Patanjali says. So if a peacock and a snake are in close proximity to a great sage, they will get rid of all the himsa. They'll all be in harmony with one another. In fact, that's one of the reasons why it's a good idea to be close to a great yogi or great guru, great sage, because our mind is naturally attuned to that place of light. In the presence of light, there cannot be darkness. So ahimsa, etc., are compared to darkness. To remove violent thoughts, etc., you just need to remove the darkness by inviting light. So that's what happens. And they say, for example, that when Mahavira was there, he was also a sage of such great ahimsa in him that around like a 10-mile radius, even the thorns were not hurting anyone. So when people are walking, thorns will simply lie down so that they will not poke the feet of people. They'll just simply lie down. So like that, that is the power of all these practices. Why do we practice ahimsa? Of course, by practicing ahimsa, satya, etc., we benefit others. But the primary beneficiary is oneself. We create a force field of there is no violence in the space surrounding us. Like Buddha, when Buddha meets Angulimala, another example. Angulimala became a devotee. Before that, he was chopping people's fingers, right? Angulimala. And for decades, he was doing that. But when he met Buddha, his violent thoughts simply disappeared.
I have a question.
So, Sri Ramji,
Yes,
so
Sriniji?
yeah, one quick question. So, should we interpret that in the olden days, the sages used to go to forest and then they used to engage in this deep tapas, penance and this stuff, where they were not perturbed by any vrittis, they conquered fear. And that's how they achieved infinite powers, because they transcend the body and the mind and the vritti.
It's interesting, right? That's the exact opposite of what Krishna tells Arjuna. Don't run away, be in the battlefield and be a yogi there. Because it's easy to go to a mountain top, sit in a cave for 20 years and then declare, oh, for 20 years, I never had an angry thought. It's very easy to say that. But in the midst of living with others, right in the midst of activity, where there are so many opportunities, so many occasions where we may get provoked. In spite of that, if you are still in a place of kindness, if you are still in a place of centeredness, that will reveal the quality of, how much in that place of yoga we are, how much in the place of samatvam we are.
It's even in the forest, like for example, there is animals, there is snakes, there is insects, there rain. Even to be able to maintain equanimity, it's almost like another battlefield, right?
Yes, you are correct. Even when we sit for meditation, for example, even a tiny mosquito that comes and sits on the skin will be experienced as a big dagger that strikes the body. You see? So you're right. Even tiny things, even a pin drop, as they say, pin drop silence, right? Sometimes in meditation, that pin drop will sound like an atom bomb. It'll really shake up the body. Today morning, I was meditating. After I did my yoga sadhana, I was finishing my meditation. And I think there was some construction that was going on. I noticed that one tiny sound, I was like, as if I levitated and fell down to the ground again. That's how it felt to me. The point is, in that state of mind, we are so sensitive. Even a tiny vritti will amplify itself. So it will be very keenly felt.
Yeah, Appa used to say that. So when he closes the room, he said, please stay calm because I'm meditating. But there's one thing that I also understood, because I used to feel very sensitive after meditating, and even the tiniest, and with a child, it's really not possible to isolate yourself and meditate. But then when that acceptance comes, even that noise or that thing, it becomes part of the meditation.
Exactly.
It becomes like music, because when I'm doing my pranayama or meditation, my child would come and sit on my lap and she would put beads on my wrist. And then what do? You just enjoy that too.
Yes, that vairagyadapi dosha bijakshaya kaivalyam is what Patanjali says. Offer vairagya, be detached to that.
Yeah.
Now, it's a very fine line, because some people may misunderstand this to be numb to what's happening. But Patanjali does not suggest that at all. That's totally against yoga. A yogi is very sensitive. Yogi is very sensitive. So in spite of being very sensitive, you are not perturbed by the opposites. That's called dvandvaha anabhigataha. We'll talk about this later. Dvandvaha, even in the extreme, for example, very cold or very hot, you are still okay. You are able to tolerate. In fact, tolerate is a very strong word. You are able to be in a place of comfort. Tolerate means you are clenching your teeth and then you are bearing it. Yogi is not in that space. Yogi is comfortable there, even in the extreme cold versus extreme heat. Like that, in the face of dvandvas, yogi is balanced. So that's what happens to a yogi. Although they are sensitive, they are centered. They're strong, they're stable, they're centered. So in the we still have about 20 minutes, right? Yeah, question.
To clarify some terminology, so when you say rope, vastu, snake, vritti, that's rope, object, snake, perception.
Exactly.
Okay, and then chitta vritti is activities of the chitta.
Yes.
Okay, and then we kind of like centered on chitta as the screen through which we experience. Is there another way we can summarize what chitta is? I've heard it most commonly defined as consciousness. So I'm wondering if that is not an
No, chitta is not consciousness. The word chitta is consciousness. Chitta is a different word. There are two different words.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought it up, because one of the definition of chitta uses the word chitta.
Okay.
Because the two words are very similar sounding, right? So I mentioned I'll give you three definitions of chitta. So one definition of chitta that uses the word chit, it goes chit iva bhavayati iti chittam. Chit iva bhavayati iti chittam. That means that which appears as the chit, but it is not the chit, is called chitta. Okay, so let's see how it applies to the screen of the mind. The reflections that you see in the mirror is not the real thing.
Still a reflection.
It's a reflection. You see, the reflections that you see in the mirror is not the reality. It might be a perfect replica of something, yes, but it's still a reflection. You see, the classic example they give is that of the moon. Look at a full moon. The midnight, the full moon appears right on top or close to the zenith, right on top. And intellectually, you know Anumana. This is where Anumana, inferentially, you know that the moon is reflecting the light of the sun. We all know it. At least the last 300 years, we know it. So you don't see the sun in the night. Yet, your logical intellect, it says that the moon is reflecting the light from the sun, the borrowed light of the sun. The chitta is just revealing the borrowed light of the self. That is why it is appearing as the chit. Although we may not have realized the self yet, know that the mind, where all the action is taking place, it's very active, it appears alive. Same thing we can say with the body. The body appears alive, but it is just a puppet of the chitta and the chit. You see?
So the sun becomes the chit here,
Yes.
and the moon becomes the chitta.
Exactly.
So from the sun, the moon borrows the light.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So the pot vastu and the pot vritti. So the space where the pot vritti happens is the chitta.
Okay.
So it's called the chitta akasha, to give it the chitta akasha. So first you have the bhuta akasha, the physical space, bhuta akasha. And then there is a chitta akasha, the space in the mind, the screen where all this reflection is taking place. It's called chitta akasha. And later on in Vedanta, they talk about a third akasha, which it doesn't make its appearance in yoga or Sankhya. It talks about chidakasha.
Okay.
So bhuta akasha, chitta akasha, and chid akasha.
Oh, okay.
But let's not go to chidakasha now, because in the yoga shastras, we deal with the chitta akasha. The purusha constantly watches what is happening in the chitta akasha. That is the idea. It is just watching the mirror every moment. Drashta drishimatraha shuddhopi pratyaya anupashya. That is a sutra in the second chapter. Drashta, the seer, keeps on watching the pratyaya, which means the scenery that is presented in the chitta all the time. That's all it does. Now, it might give a false impression that this purusha is a couch potato, right? All it is doing, it is sitting in a sofa, it is doing nothing. It is just watching the TV screen called chitta. It might give that impression, right? It is not so. The purusha, or you can call it the chit, or the drashta, is like the sun. The sun is so far away, but the mere presence of the sun illumines the activity of this planet, right? Like that, the mere presence of the purusha activates this body. All the physiological processes in the body happen because the purusha is sitting there. The moment the purusha steps out, the moment it exits the body, then all the physiological processes come to a grinding halt. So the presence of the purusha is active. It is not a couch potato. It is like the sun, it's radiating its presence. And it is through its radiation, it's activating the body, mind, etc. And what is it that is radiating? Sun is radiating light. What is the purusha radiating? It is radiating prana. Sun is like the self. The earth is like the body and the mind complex. And the sun's rays is like the prana. In this analogy, the sun rays is like the prana. We have a question. Raghuji?
Yeah, quite a bit of a discussion happened since I wanted to ask that question. So you talked about transcend, and that could also mean ignore versus transcend. And then there was a word called detach that came about. So how do
transcend you... We are not ignoring it. It is just that it is no longer tormenting our experience. It's no longer causing the suffering. It is there.
Then how do
For
you
example, when they're totally focused on a task at hand, some tiny sounds outside, it doesn't bother us.
But we are always in awareness, right? We're always in awareness. aware
Awareness,
but
yes.
aware but detached from the effects.
Correct. It's like, are we stuck in the waves of the ocean, or have we tuned ourselves to the depth of the ocean where it is all calm and tranquil? Waves can still be there, but you have attuned the mind. The spotlight of awareness is shining on that silent space.
There was a question from earlier on, right? We talked about Purusha, right? But in the context of that, how do you visualize or represent three?
Represent which one?
Three.
Oh, the Purusha is just used. It's not lingam. It's not a pullingam, strilingam, napumsakalingam.
Okay.
It is like drashta, Purusha, etc. It is just been used. We need some root noun. In Sanskrit, it's called pratipadikam. And by definition, all the root nouns come with like pullingam, strilingam, or napumsakalingam. So by convention, you have to assign something. But in reality, it does not, it cannot be classified into one of the three.
But we can use Prakriti as the closest, right? Prakriti kind of represents one that is encompasses all action.
Yeah, Prakriti in the context of Sankhya and Yoga, which includes the Yoga Sutras, right? From this perspective, Prakriti is what is called Jadam. Jada means inanimate. Prakriti is inanimate. From this model, from Yoga Sutras and from Sankhya. In Vedanta, if we go, then Prakriti is actually an appearance of the one Brahman. So it's very interesting. For example, Sankhya says there is a multiplicity of Purushas. The self that is residing in the heart of all beings, right? They're all different selves. They're like little stars. They're all separate and unique. But they are the same in the sense that one is not better than the other, right? It's like if you use cash for a transaction, whether you like this $10 note or this $10 note, we don't care, right? It's all same. So the self is like that. There are different self, different $10 notes you can think of. So there's no difference, intrinsic difference between the self, but there's a multiplicity of self. That's what Sankhya says. Sankhya also says there's only one Prakriti, one universe where we are all having a shared experience. It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Vedanta says, no. All these different selves are the reflection of one self, which is called Brahman. It is like single sun when it is reflected by multiple raindrops. You see different points of light. But ultimately, there's only one light. So that is the Brahman. So that is what Vedanta says. And ultimately, the Prakriti itself is a manifestation of the Brahman. So if somebody asks, this Prakriti seems to be Jadam, seems to be inanimate. So how can it arise out of Brahman? So that's the question some people ask, right? And for that, in one of the Upanishads, I forget which Upanishad, it gives a very beautiful analogy. If you take the human body, the nail and the hair is Jadam. So like that, the same organism, the same Brahman can have some aspects, the Prakriti, which appears as Jadam, but it's still part of that Brahman. So like that, it gives a...
Anna, I have a doubt. I thought Prakriti was animate and Purusha was inanimate.
It's the other way around. The conscious entity is the Purusha, and the Prakriti, according to Sankhya and Yoga, is the inanimate. So there are, in fact, the Sankhya philosophy is captured, the summary of it is captured in the Yoga Sutras, in 4 sutras of Patanjali in the 2nd chapter. Maybe we'll deal with it tomorrow. It will take a little more time. I think that will give a very amazing perspective. What is the role of the Purusha? What is the role of the Prakriti? If I want happiness, should I ask Purusha or should I ask Prakriti? What is the Prakriti there for? What should I do to, how can I best use the Prakriti? In fact, you can categorize all of this into 4 questions, 4 fundamental questions. Would you like to know what are the 4 fundamental questions? So the first fundamental question is, who am I? Okay. Second fundamental question is, why am I here? Why am I here? Like this situation, or why am I having this body, etc. The third fundamental question is, where am I? Where am I? Like in this part of the universe, in this planet, in this Prakriti, etc. So the second question was, why am I where I am? Third was, where am I? And then the fourth question is, okay, now that I am here, what is the best course of action, right? What am I supposed to do? Now that I am here, what am I supposed to do? So all the scriptures, they talk about these 4 fundamental questions of life. You can add more questions like, is there a Ishvara? Is there a controller? What is my relationship to that Ishvara? Yoga Sutras talk about that. Yoga Sutra adds to Sankhya. Remember I said yoga stands on the foundation of Sankhya. When you read the Sankhya texts, Sankhya Karika, it makes no mention of Ishvara, it makes no mention of Brahman, nothing. It just makes the, it gives a description of the Purusha and the Prakriti. It says Prakriti can be further subdivided into 24 tattvas. So we have 24 tattvas of the Prakriti and 1 Purusha tattva, totaling 25. So there is no mention of God, no mention of Ishvara. It doesn't take a position. Is there God or not? That question is not even addressed in Sankhya. So that is why the true, pure Sankhya is called Nirishvara Sankhya. That means Ishvara is not even mentioned in that Sankhya. Yoga, in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali introduces this entity called Ishvara. Now, when we define Ishvara as God, there's a danger there, right? Because we have a baggage of, we have some understanding of what God should be. Is God somebody like a Superman? Or is God somebody like a emperor who controls all of us? He gives all the rules and we have to abide by the rules. What is the role of the Ishvara? Is Ishvara somehow different from the other Purushas? The answer to that is no. Ishvara is one more fellow. Just like all of us, right? Each, in the heart of all beings is a entity, that Purusha. Ishvara is one more Purusha. But what distinguishes Ishvara as something different? You will see that maybe in tomorrow's session. Because when we talk about Guru, Patanjali talks about Ishvara as the Guru. So we will examine that in tomorrow's session. But I think we should complete this, right? So the definitions of yoga. This is one of the things that we started out our session today with. We looked at the definition of yoga as union, right? Union of the different parts of the body, or union of the body, mind, breath, etc. So vertical integration or horizontal integration. That is one definition of yoga. Second definition, Yuja Samadha, yoga as samadhi, equilibrium, samatvam or samadhi as it is called. That state of equilibrium of the mind is yoga. The third definition, complete control of the mind, which is called samyama, Yuja Samyamane. Complete. Yama means control. Samyama means complete control of the mind. So these 3 definitions you will find in the classic dictionary, which is called the Dhatu Pata, which was compiled by Panini. The rest of the definition you will see in other places. The fourth definition is tied to the third one, because in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says that if you have complete control of the mind, if you are in a place of samyama, then you are actually unleashing the full potential of the mind. Our mind is capable of doing amazing things. My teacher used to give the example of somebody buys a Ferrari car and they are just using it to go to their neighborhood grocery store. That's it. They're not using it for anything else. So what use? They could have as well used a different vehicle, right? So we are all having this very precious resource called the mind with lot of superpowers. There are 3 superpowers that Patanjali talks about, and we will look at them in one of the future sessions. So we are using only a tiny fraction of our superpower. We are living on a gold mine, and we are just scratching the surface there. So blossoming of the inner potential to its full form is also called yoga. So like a flower bud, every being has the potential to blossom to fullness, and blossoming of the inner potential to fullness is called yoga. I'm quoting the words of Sri Sri Ravi Shankarji. That's how he quotes this. Blossoming of the inner potential to fullness is yoga. And then the next definition, remedies to quiet the mind, upaya. So yoga is not just a state of equilibrium, it is also the disciplines that take you there. Yoga practices, as we say. This is a definition that we see in Yoga Vasishtam, Yoga Vasishtam. Manah prashamana upayaha. Manah prashamana upayaha yoga iti abhidiyate. That's the definition you see in the Yoga Vasishtam. And then there's another definition, attainment. Yoga is attainment. And once you attain something, keeping that attainment is called kshemam. So these 2 words, yoga and kshemam, are usually used as a pair. For example, there's a very famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, 22nd verse, which goes, Ananyas chintayanto mam yejanaf paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yoga kshemam vahamyaham. There, the meaning of yoga is attainment. You attain something. There's an inner transformation that allows you to do something that was not available to you before. So this is attainment, yoga. And then there's another interesting definition. We saw yoga as union first. Yoga is also defined as a disunion from misery. Krishna says to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, just because yoga is called union, you don't want to unite with all sorts of junk, right? In the universe, you have to be careful what you invite in your experience. So disunion from misery is called yoga. And there's a verse, the 6th chapter, I think it is the 23rd verse of the 6th chapter. Tam vidya dukkha samyoga viyogam yoga uchyate. So tam vidya dukkha samyoga. We are now in samyoga with dukkha. We are now united with misery. And viyogam. Viyoga means disunion. So disunion with what you have been associating before is called yoga, he says. So these are all different definitions. I realized there's one 8th definition that I missed. You can add that. I'll put that also in the whiteboard. Another definition of yoga is inner transformation. Inner transformation. And Patanjali talks about the mechanics of inner transformation in the 3rd chapter of the Yoga Sutras.
Beautiful handwriting.
So in the 3rd chapter, inner transformation, the actual word that is used is parinama. Parinama means transformation. And parinama has been defined as yoga. So that inner transformation itself is yoga. And the transformation gives you that attainment. So these 2 definitions go hand in hand, attainment and inner transformation. Yes. Gunavritti virodascha dukkhameva sarvam vivekina. There you see parinama. This word parinama is used in many places, even in the Bhagavad Gita. Remember, we started our session today by defining what is discipline. Discipline gives higher joy. In Bhagavad Gita, it is translated as sattvic joy. Sattvic joy. The way sattvic joy is defined is yattadagre vishamiva pariname. Uses the word parinama. Pariname amrutopamam. That means yattad agre. In the short term, it appears as a visham, poison. It's unpalatable. I don't want to do it. I don't feel like doing yoga every day. So that is the resistance in the mind. But pariname amrutopamam. There is a transformation that happens that you find it so enjoyable, like the nectar, so life-giving, like elixir, as they say, amritam. So that type of sukham is called sattvic sukham. That is what anushasanam gives. That is the self-inspired practice or discipline. So I hope this session was kind of useful, not just entertaining, but educational and transforming. Parinama.
When
Yes, Anuja.
Yoga is the inner transformation, which that particular definition could be tied up with attainment. But attainment, attaining what?
Attainment is what we have decided. Okay, this is my goal, and I want to achieve that goal. And I take step-by-step progress towards it. And Patanjali talks about that. Kramanyatvam parinamanyatve hetuhu. Hetu means cause. We saw that before. And in the third chapter, he says, Kramanyatvam parinamanyatve hetuhu. Krama means incremental steps, step by step, krama by krama. We have all heard of the name Vikrama, right? Vikram. Vikram means victorious step. And Vishnu is called Trivikrama, 3 victorious steps, the Vamanavatar, right? The story, 3 victorious steps. So in order to create a transformation, take step by step progress towards it. For example, if you want to bring the mind to a place of bliss or tranquility, when you meditate one day, like 20 minutes, you sit and meditate, monkey mind will not settle down with 1 day of practice, right? Don't get dejected. Don't get disillusioned. Oh, my mind is not fit for meditation. I'm not going to practice meditation at all. What Patanjali says is keep doing that. At one time, there'll be a tipping point that happens and your mind will automatically be quiet. So step by step, each step contributes to the final transformation. It's like boil water. You don't see any physical change until you reach 100 degrees C. Then it becomes vapor. But you cannot say that only the last bit of heat contributed to the change. Every ounce of heat that we introduced was useful for the transformation. So although we don't see any physical evidence that it is working, in the inner world it is working. We are just not sensing it. So keep up with that work, and one fine day, you will notice the mind absolutely becomes quiet.
And secondly, you kept giving example of vastu and vritti. For an example, pot and the vritti. So is any example of like instead of object, subject also could be vastu, like person? And the vritti, I met that person and I had a smriti of that person, good or bad, whatever, klishta, aklishta, whatever. But now my vritti is like distorted when I'm meeting the person again. So because there's a smriti coming into the picture at that time, number one. So vastu, like instead of pot, we can use it as a subject also. Because
subject means ultimately the true subject is the I.
Right.
The I experience. In fact, Vyasa, in the Vyasa Bhasha, the commentary to the Yoga Sutras, he uses the word aham vritti. Aham vritti. The feeling that I am, it is a vritti actually. Right? In deep sleep, we don't have that vritti. So that aham vritti, I am there. There's a conviction that I am there. So it appears as a vritti. But aham vritti is still a vritti. We have to transcend even that. Right? And not just look at the reflection of the aham, but repose in the truth of who I am, self-realization. So that is what the yoga sadhana gears us towards.
So instead of object, there could be subject also. Like how you give an example of tree or rope or pot. The same way it could be subject as well, which creates vritti in us.
Yes.
I mean, we are creating actually. This is just a mirror. The world is just a mirror, actually, right? The whole world is just...
The mind is the mirror. According to yoga, there is a reality to the physical world. It is there. It is not a dream. It is there. In Vedanta, they say it's an appearance. How do you know that whatever you are seeing here is not manufactured in the mind, just like how things are manufactured in your dream? How do you know? We cannot prove it actually. But in the Sankhya and the yoga worldview, there is a physical reality. It is there. It is real. Prakriti is real. And tomorrow I said we'll talk about the 4 sutras that capture the essence of Sankhya. We will see what the role of the Prakriti is. What does it serve? Why is it there? If you want to free ourselves from the clutches of Prakriti, why is it there in the first place?
Prakriti is the word over here.
Prakriti is all the, inanimate.
But on this note, I'm a little bit confused about thinking of Chitta as the screen and as the mirror. So can you clarify that? Like
Yeah.
in both ways?
Yeah, I think we made this both arguments. It's a screen, it's a mirror, etc. Screen in the sense like a TV screen, and you have a surveillance camera outside.
Okay.
So it's still a mirror.
It's still
Oh, I
a
see.
place where the drama of the world is presenting itself.
But I thought it's a mirror reflecting the Chit, right?
That is a good question. So
It's a mirror of the Chit, but a screen of the external world.
what you said, the reflection of the Chit is the Aham Vritti. We just spoke about it, Aham Vritti, right? I am.
Okay.
The thought of I am. Ramana Maharishi, he talks about it. One of the sadhana, he says, is when you wake up in the morning, because in deep sleep, we don't have that Aham Vritti. When you wake up in the morning, catch that moment when the Aham Vritti surfaces into our awareness. Catch that moment. Make the mind so sharp that you are able to alert. You are so alert that you are able to catch it. Then it will guide you towards more and more self-reflection, self-realization.
So Prakriti is all manifestation or Purusha is unmanifested, right?
Purusha is unmanifest. Prakriti, if you read the Sankhya philosophy, right? If you read Sankhya Karika, and also in the Bhagavad Gita, I'll quote the verse in the Bhagavad Gita in a few moments. So Prakriti can be divided into 24 tattvas, right? For example, the 5 bhutas, pancha bhutas, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. They're all 5 of the 24. There are more. There are subtle elements called tanmatras, and there is intellect, there is ego, ahamkara, and the subtlest of the Prakriti is called Mula Prakriti. Mula Prakriti, it is also called Pradhana. It's a technical term in Sankhya, Pradhana or Mula Prakriti. Mula Prakriti is also unmanifest. So just because it is unmanifest, it doesn't mean that it has life. Even a Prakriti, Jadam, inanimate, can also be unmanifest. You see? And in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says, the biggest siddhi that you can attain, the biggest accomplishment you can attain is to distinguish between this Mula Prakriti and the Purusha. They both appear similar because both are unmanifest. But distinguishing between the Jadam unmanifest, the Mula Prakriti versus the Purusha. Sattva Purushayo, Atyanta Sankirnayo, Pratyaya Vishesho, Bhoga Parartatva, Swartha Samyamat, Purusha Jnanam. It's a big sutra. 3rd chapter, 35th sutra. And there he talks about this principle. So I mentioned that because Prakriti, some aspects of Prakriti can also be unmanifest. And for example, in today's understanding of the cosmology, they talk about dark matter. The description of dark matter is very, very similar to this Mula Prakriti that they give in Sankhya. It's very fascinating. As a scientist myself, I see a lot of parallels, and it's just fascinating how there are so many common elements. So the verse that I wanted to quote, the 24 tattvas of Prakriti has been mentioned in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. 13th chapter is a little dicey because there are 2 versions of Bhagavad Gita. Some versions have an extra shloka in the 13th chapter, which is the first shloka. So if you include that verse, then the verse that I'm going to say is number 7. Otherwise, it's verse number 6. Okay. And the verse goes, Oh, right now, forgetfulness vritti has struck my mind. So, Mahabhutanya buddhiravyaktameva cha indriyani dashaikam cha panchachendriya gocharaha is the verse. So, Mahabhutani, the five bhutas, ahankaraha, ego, Mahabhutani, ahankaraha, buddhihi, intellect, avyaktameva cha. Avyaktam is this mula prakriti. It is not manifest. And then indriyani dasha ekam cha. Indriyani means the senses, which include the five sense organs, the five organs of action, and the one mind. So there are 11 totally. Indriyani dasha ekam cha. And then pancha chendriya gocharaha. Pancha cha indriya gocharaha. These are the tanmatras. And if we have some time later, we will examine what these tanmatras are. It's very fascinating.
And again, if we have time, will you talk about those, something you're talking about, vertical aspect of integration, Annamaya Kosha, Panchamaya Kosha, Jnanamaya Kosha, and how this body level I could understand that vritti thing, but even the vertical aspect, if we have time, would you discuss that too tomorrow, please? Each one, each koshas.
Do that, yeah. Patanjali doesn't talk about that topic at all. The reason is, he doesn't define yoga as union. He defines yoga as samadhi. So he does not talk about the union principle at all, whether jivatma, paramatma, or body and the mind. He doesn't talk about it at all. But yeah, we can overview that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think it's a good place to conclude today's session. Let me close with please chant. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Thank you all. Dhanyavadaha. Thank you for your enthusiastic listening and participation in very enlivening discussions. So we will meet again tomorrow, same time. We'll start at 2 p.m. sharp Central Time. Oh yeah, tomorrow morning session.
7 to 8:30 is what.
7:30.
So a quick show of hands. How many of us can come here for practice? Okay. So depending on how many can be physically here, what time, because it's just a few of us, looks like, what time would be the most convenient?
8 o'clock.
8?
Yeah, it's just I have to catch an Uber.
Sure. Shall we meet at 8:30 then? We'll do indoor yoga.
Okay.
8:30 is fine?
8:30 is fine.
Yeah, because outdoor might be hot.
Okay.
Yeah.
8:30.
Are okay, or those who are perpetually in beginner state are okay then?
Yeah, it's open to everybody. Yeah. We will do yoga practices that are gentle but rooted in the tradition. And we will use some of the sutras that we will learn in tomorrow's session. We will apply them in the yoga mat.
Okay.
How to do asanas, what are the pranayamas. We will also do, maybe not tomorrow's session, but we'll slowly lead up our pranayama practice for some classic Krishnamacharya pranayamas that he used to. He was big, he manufactured many pranayamas, which are very unique to the Krishnamacharya tradition. And we will practice some of that, Samantraka pranayama, and things like Anuloma Ujjayi, Pratiloma Ujjayi, Viloma Ujjayi pranayama. Have you done any of these?
No.
So we'll practice some of that. We'll practice
Tomorrow
that.
at 8:30, is it?
8:30 is fine?
8:30 is
Or you want to meet earlier?
Earlier, it will be 9:30 Eastern time otherwise.
But I can come after, or before 8 o'clock I have to finish and go,
Oh,
or come after 8:45.
okay.
So you guys continue. It's okay. I can join Monday.
So how about 8:15? 8:15 we will do it.
Yes.
Yes, Anujaji?
Yes, it's good. I mean, Eastern time for us. So,
Oh, okay.
so I would love to
That's
join
1 hour
them.
ahead
Yeah.
Eastern time. So that means
And-
9:15 your time, the Eastern time.
No, it will be too late, but even whatever works out good for everyone, I will flow with it. Even 9 is fine, whatever you all decide.
How about 8?
Okay.
8,
Okay.
which is 9 EST.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And one other question is, should we do more postures or should we focus more on pranayama, mindfulness kind of stuff, and then use more of knowledge the time that we have with Sriramji?
I would say more
Perhaps we'll do a
pranayama.
mix of all three.
Yeah.
As we saw, the combination of postures, breathwork, and meditation is extraordinarily powerful. Right? Synergy. We will bring about that synergy. Maybe we will do a special set of yoga postures that is taught by Sri Sri Ravi Shankarji through the Art of Living. I'm a teacher also through the Art of Living Foundation. And there's a special sequence of postures called Padma Sadhana. How many of us have practiced Padma Sadhana? It's a sequence of 14 postures.
Yeah.
So we will do a few rounds of Surya Namaskar. Maybe we will even learn Surya Namaskar with mantras. In fact, my very first introduction when I started learning yoga was practice of Surya Namaskar with mantras. We will do that practice. And then we will do the Padma Sadhana, which is a special sequence of 14 postures that guides the practitioner towards Antaranga Sadhana, that is inner exploration, like introspective state of mind. And then we will practice some pranayama and some meditation practices. The whole thing will take about 90 minutes. Is that okay?
Okay.
Awesome.
Will you take us a little deeper in Padma Sadhana? Because I do know but little deeper meaning of Padma Sadhana and how it is affecting Kundalini, or a little deeper. I mean, YouTube
will
also
look at
has
that.
Padma Sadhana. Even on YouTube there is. And I'm also a Shri Shri yoga teacher. So
Nice.
I've been practicing also Padma Sadhana, but I would really wanted to, there is a thirst to learn a little more about it, which you as a yogi, as a practitioner, you may be able to throw some good highlight on Padma Sadhana a little bit more. If you can just talk along with it, would be a help.
We'll
How
do
can
that.
we deepen our practice? Those who are already practicing Padma Sadhana, how can we deepen
Yes.
it more?
We'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
So thank you all. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Namaste.
And thank you.